We are live with Jake Hoffberg and his echo, bro. You gotta do something about that. I can hear myself.
Do I got an echo? Hold on one second.
There's a little bit of echo, and if I get excited and I start talking loudly, it's gonna be
Let
on.
me see if I can just switch over to my headset so we can get rid of that.
It's that giant mountain estate that you're in right now, and the Rockies, so wherever the California coast.
Man. All
It's
right.
just echoing throughout the halls.
Hey, I just popped in my earbuds. Is this better? Is that removing the echo?
Hello. Yeah, seems good, brother.
All right, cool. Yeah, I've got this like Yeti mic thing.
Mm-hmm. I got the Yeti mic.
Right, and then like my speakers, are right on the desk, right next to it, so it'll send, whatever. Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. Anyway, dude, nice to talk to you. Baby. Your beard is nice and tight. Your chest hair is on point here.
I got to talk about this really quick. So I had on my Under Armour t-shirt, my typical thing. And then I was like, no, I feel like the open chest shirts is like a crowd pleaser. It's like a statement now. But because I knew I was going to be hanging out with you, I wore a Bugatti unbuttoned shirt, like $180 shirt, instead of just wearing my usual flower attire.
Did you get that in Vegas?
No, this is made in Boca Raton. They operate out of here. Yeah, it's in Nordstrom's. It's fucking, and it's like almost like crafted for this environment. Like it's lighter than air. It's sort of like I could just wear this in almost any environment and be both dope and cool at the same time. Ooh, I should do a fucking ad for Bugatti. I should be getting that free shit, dude.
You should be getting that swag. Yeah. So dude, I know you told me not to prepare, and we're supposed to just call and hang out. So I had to get in the middle. So I did it half. I listened to your interview with Sean Mack, our mutual friend, while I was working out. So it wasn't like really preparing, but I gotta say I won't spoil the surprise. So for those of you who haven't watched it, had a pretty great opener from Sean. Nice cold open there. About a certain we'll call it health secret that may or may not improve performance of mental.
But anyway, it's good for podcasting. All right, I think really I don't know. That's my theory. It's my thesis. I don't want to. So it's no fap for conversation. I just don't know what to call it. I think no con makes no sense. Like no. It's just zero contact is what it means. It's like Jake texted me. He's like, hey, buddy. Like, shut the fuck up. I was like, don't talk to me. We have to like save it all and let it You got to retain the conversation until we're actually on the podcast. So we have something to talk about. Otherwise, just be on like, what's new? Oh, not much. Nah, nobody likes that.
All the stuff we talked about yesterday. Yeah. Well, Well, cool, man. Well, it's been a couple months since we talked, and you've been threatening me with getting on this podcast for weeks now. So, so here we are.
You ran all the way to the other side of the continent, and I was like, I will find you if you don't fuck on my podcast and talk shit with me. I like, I think you're a good compliment or follow up to like Sean Mack, because Sean is in his own way, in like a gentler academic sort of sense, disagreeable, argumentative might be like a kind of word for it. You're also that, but not as politely,
but also abrasive.
Yeah. I sent out an email. I'm pretty sure I have the word abrasive in my email I sent out like 40 minutes ago for people to join this.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, let's get disagreeable then, as you would like to say. And we can get some drama and some good clips here for syndication that are wild and controversial and have great open loops and possibly insulting and may or may not get me canceled from the internet. So let's rock and roll, baby.
Yeah, but like, are you really that big of a staple on the internet that like being canceled would be like a thing? Like you could just like...
Yeah, I mean, again, right? Like we're all heroes in our own mind, and I'm, way more important than I actually am. And and you can see my. So by the way, so this is a green screen, and normally it's the default one in Zoom where it's like the Northern Lights or whatever, and in StreamYard this is like the default background. So, it does not resemble my actual room, but clearly, if it did, this would be part of my, my self-esteem right here is clearly I'm in a bigger, better room than you are, Kyle, even though you got that fancy award.
When I saw that shit first pop up, like it took me like half a second to recognize it for what it was, but I was just like, oh, Jesus, fuck, Jake's better than me now. That house looks fucking dope. Nah, it's StreamYard green screen.
And incidentally, that actually might be a really good way to start the discussion, right? Is the difference between personalities we create and display on the internet for persuasive purposes and like the actual truth of who you are.
Go. I sense like you've got some opinions on this shit.
Ooh, well, I didn't want this to just be like a copywriting interview since we've done too many of those, and you've got like a whole whatever, you've got all that stuff, and I feel like the most interesting conversations are both philosophical and paradoxical at the same time, right? Like there's not like easy answers to hard questions, even though as copywriters, like we tend to be in this rhythm or motion of presenting people with very binary choices.
I told you, if your vibrating phone is on the same surface as your Yeti, that's all coming through. Just so you know, it's like
I just turned off my I have my Slack going and it buzzes to my phone, so I just dumped that and got rid of that. So phone should not be vibrating.
So what you were basically to say is Instagram hoes ain't shit. I'm pretty sure that's eventually what you were getting.
That's basically the t-shirt that we're going with right there is Instagram hoes ain't shit. But so actually before I launch into that, I want to have some context, right? Because like, I've known
Instagram hoe broke your heart.
Well, hold on. I want to come back to the main topic, which is perception versus reality, and ways we see ourselves and the ways that we unfairly compare ourselves to other people, and kind of like this sort of like, what are we all chasing? What's the game we're playing? Why are we doing it? Kind of the search for meaning in a post-success environment, and what is success, and what all, and especially is. I've watched you sort of come out the other side of a, call it a challenging life event, and trying to figure out like, who am I and what does it all mean and who am I supposed to be becoming, and kind of going down, a path into a new version of yourself. And I think there's a lot in there. And again, I try not to prepare too much, but, we first met in person. Man, it must have been like 2018, either late 2018, early 2019 in Baltimore was like the first time I ever met you in person.
Can I set the scene a little bit?
Yeah, you can. All right.
I don't know. All I got is like one thing, 3-piece suit. And I was wearing like this watch or something. And you were in fucking Baltimore, Maryland. And I said, bro, you're going to get robbed. And I was like, I even told you, I was like, what the hell are you thinking? And I was like, you got on like, I said something like, you got on like a $300 or $400 watch right there. They're going for that easy. And you were like, try $1,200 or some shit like that. You were like wearing some blinging ass. You had the 3-piece suit, like purple or pink or some accent color as a pinstripes and shit. And I was like, bruh, you ain't from around here, are you, dude?
Yeah, ridiculous, right? So that's actually a good place to start, right? So that person, the suit, right, was a character I played, and is a character that I learned how to play as a result of like a previous version of my life when I sold suits. And for so many reasons, that was the wrong decision going into Agora Financial. But like, it was so inherently like in alignment with what I was trying to be, which was completely like, so Joe Schriefer, I met with him when I was at like Copy Chief, and he's like, bro, you are a walking pattern interrupt. Right. Cause like,
I like that. That's a good thing to be labeled. I like that.
And to some degree, it was a kind of a high risk bet there, right? Because to dress in a manner so different from your reference group, right? It's like, it's a pattern interrupt, but like, it's a hardcore rapport breaker when I'm like, hey, I'm new to this organization. I came from a different one in Agora. I've been recruited into a position of authority and power, which, had its own challenges. And, here I am, like the outsider, right? Like I'm like the contrarian, right? I like do not fit into the Agora. Like if I was at Stansberry, and now we're getting into way too insider baseball, like I could have had more of that country club look, and I kind of would have fit into that kind of culture, but like not the Agora Financial culture at all. Right.
But what you mean by contrarian for folks who don't understand is like Agora was the contrarians. Like we are the independent / like libertarian, but you were second tier contrarian, because then you were like, I'm wearing a suit around these folks in t-shirts. So it's like you were like contrarian to the contrarians.
Yeah, right. So the reason I did those things, well, A is I like clothes. I had a bunch of them that I never got to wear. And I was going to be in an environment where I was going back to the office. So I'm like, well, fuck, like I have, a lot of clothes, right? Like, I probably have, again, so I used to sell menswear. So like I have like a closet, probably like $50,000 worth of, 12 suits, 8 sport coats, 10 pairs, like just a ton of it, right? From when I did that. And, like, why would I not wear that stuff? It's fucking nice. It's comfortable. It looks good. It makes me feel good, right? Like I get to have some of that pizzazz over there. But, to some degree, right, what I was wearing was like this persona that I had to put on to go out into the world to try and, be someone else.
Right? Yeah, I can definitely tell. I mean, I can kind of see where this conversation is going, because I definitely know you've settled down. It's almost like you've matured into yourself in a way. Like you're more you when you're not playing the character.
Yeah. And to some degree, like this was my own personal journey, kind of, and maybe this might actually be like the interesting counterpoint here. And I don't know if you've gone through it, where like I went into direct response on one side of the coin in 2016 of probably where like a lot of people who listen to these types of channels are in, which was, I was doing well for myself. I was still making like, 6 figures in my sales, but I hated it. And I was like, I want some of that internet money, right? I want that remote work from home, work from anywhere money. And then, I heard about copywriting. It sounded, it was very appealing to me. It seemed to align with kind of like my existing interests and skill sets. And I was willing to do the work. And so, by a combination of hard work and some luck, which I think like people really just they don't account for how important getting lucky is. And really luck is like, it's a statistical, hey, if you have a 1 in 50 shot of making this and you happen to be the 1 in 50, was it a statistical, anomaly, or like, hey, it's just statistically possible, or did you actually do something that made that happen? Right. And I think that's that paradox of success, and success too early, where like, hey, was it luck or was it skill? And then, so like the most dangerous thing in publishing, in my opinion, is your first promo is a winner, right? The first thing you ever write and goes out the gate is a winner. Well, now you're like, oh, fuck, this is going to be cake, right? If I'm just pumping out, 7-figure, whatever it was. So my first promo was a book promo that really hit.
Was it the Dent one?
Yeah, it did like, I think it did like, it did basically all of our front end names that year. It was like 12,000 front end names on that file. I made, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in royalties that year off that one promo. And I'm like, fuck yes, right? This is going to be awesome. And then followed by like a series of bombs right after that. And then it took me a while to like, get some more success kind of back in there. And, to this point of like being someone you're not is I had the experience of, as I sort of rose through the ranks of Agora, my income was increasing. And then at some point you sort of come face to face with like what you're doing for money. And I'm not going to turn this into like Agora is an evil corporation. It's not a productive thing, but like at some point, right? Like all of us have that conversation of like, man, do I feel good about the way that I'm making the money that I make, right? Is it in alignment with my values, or the people that I work with in alignment? Like, and so, when you get to a certain number of money, you have the luxury of having that conversation with yourself, right?
I think that conversation right there, when you get there, you have the luxury of having that conversation. There's a lot of people that say stuff like money doesn't buy happiness, and like, oh, cars doesn't do this, and like having a bunch of girls doesn't do that. But it's like, you're speaking as a person who came from the lack and then chased it and then achieved it. And now that you're on the other side of it, people want to say happiness comes from within. And I'm like, go fuck yourself. Like, bullshit. Now that you've summited the mountain, you want to be like, oh, you know what? I was actually happier when I was broke. And no, you weren't, or you wouldn't have done all this shit. So I don't know. That's like a personal rant that I have about like how people, and we maybe go back to that later at some point, but this is like, I've part of this channel and my development and my journey has been like my gripe with self-improvement fucking platitudes that are not applicable, and they come from people who are talking straight out their ass most of the time. Now that they have everything laid out and they wake up and they're like, their beautiful wife is laying there in their $1 million mansion, and then they work 2 hours a day, and then they get on a fucking podcast and try to tell me how to achieve happiness. And it's like, you know what I'm saying?
And it's like, born in America, hetero, cisgendered white male of, above average attractiveness and, above average wealth. Like, yeah, dude, you got a lot of things going for you, right? That are easy. And me included, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, but I saw this one video. It's this girl named Tatiana. I don't know how it came out, because I'm a self-improvement junkie. And the headline said like how to be confident. And I saw the thumbnail. This girl is a dime. It's like she opens the thing with like, I struggled with confidence. I almost want to pull her up and be like, would you go after this girl? Like, would you date this chick? And it's like, how when you walk in a room, everybody looks. Everybody's eyes light up. Everybody bends over backwards like, hey, is it comfortable in here? Are you hungry? Can I get you a drink? Do you want a sweater? Like, look. I'll show you. I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull this shit up.
We're going to do it.
This shit is like...
Well, we're about to get into the great paradox. That is physical attractiveness.
Right. So I'm going to share the screen here. It's this one. This one here. Tatiana James.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, right. So, yeah, she's married to Kevin James, right? The who runs the Something Wealth Project. Yeah. So she was like a drop shipper and had some beauty line, and then started selling, like, moved into the biz op, like make money online. And then she's got, so Kevin James is another one of these guru people as well.
But like, that's what I'm talking about. You've got this straight dime piece giving self-improvement advice. Like, no one has ever been mean to you.
Hold on. That is so oversimplified.
Fine.
Woman.
Fine. Yes. Okay, fine. I'll meet you there. But like you've never gone to like out in public and just had someone be disrespectful to you because you like exist. I remember in college, one of the reasons I got into weightlifting, like taking it serious, was because I'm about 5'7", and I had very little mass when I was like 21. And I didn't have any facial hair, and I didn't have like a chiseled jawline. Like, it's all the things that you don't like that do not work for you. I had all of them. And I remember like having to like say, okay, something's got to change, because people would like physically displace me when I was waiting for drinks at the bar. Like, just because they were like, I'm going to get a drink and you're smaller than me, so I'm going to move you. And this is like the kind of disrespect that real people, like average people, deal with. Like, that's real disrespect. Like, not a mean comment on YouTube. I'm talking like, what are you going to do when this larger person comes up and just like physically disrespects you, and how are you going to react? And it's like fucking telling me to love myself on some bullshit YouTube thing. Like, that's one of like the little, I'm feeling sassy today, Jake.
You are like, feeling sassy.
You caught me. Like, I'm fucking like I have a bone to pick, and I've been digging deeper and deeper into it. One of the guys that I follow is this kid named Gerbert. He was in the screenshot earlier. he's like black pilled, which I'm starting to learn about too. He sees things a little bit more clearly, I would say.
Well, is that nihilism, or I don't know what the pill colors are.
All right, so there's sort of like a genetic determinism. Like there's red pill is like the self improvement. Like you can self improve your stuff. Like you can make yourself more attractive.
Well,
okay, I believe in a lot of this.
The red pill, blue pill is right matrix. So blue pill, you stay asleep, and red pill is you awaken to reality as it is, according to whoever is promoting the new reality.
Yeah. And so in that, you can sort of optimize for that reality, which is something that I believe, like make yourself more attractive. Like when I started working out and grew facial hair and made myself look a little bit more grizzled and masculine, people stopped doing that bullshit at the bars. Also, when I just straight up said, "What the fuck are you doing?" you would be surprised that people are like, "Wait, my bad." Like whenever like there's an actual consequence for their actions, they'll fucking back down. But the black pill is sort of like this. It's like this idea that mate selection is sort of predetermined by looks and like certain opportunities and that sort of stuff. Like it's like if you're a 5 or a below in the attraction scale, you're just fucked. Like almost like give up. It is sort of nihilistic. But if you're like in the average zone, you know red pill can work for you. And then there's like Chad, which is like the 9-10 dudes. It's like I know some of these dudes, and I said it to whoever I was talking to last, was like these dudes think they have game, and they're like 6'4" with like they look like Chris Hemsworth, and I'm like, bro, you don't have game. You could have literally burped in her face. Like it doesn't. You don't have game. You're just perfect specimen, dude. So they'll try to give you advice, and it's like that would never work for an average dude. But anyway, I've always been like a self-improvement junkie. And like you said, I sort of went through my phase of meditation, self-exploration, sort of trying to process my traumas and unpack my bullshit. And one of the most frustrating things, it's just like when I came up with Nesby for copywriting. I was so tired of the bullshit advice in like Facebook groups and just fucking the blind leading the blind, like these green newbies trying to give me advice. That's how I feel like I am now with the self-improvement and like not just meditation, but like the overall like self-love space. Now that I've sort of like started to see my way through some progress, I'm filtering out all the bullshit. And I think having someone who's like a perfect specimen human talk about self-love feels ironic to me. Like that's where we come full circle on this shit.
So now we come full circle to how I started this, which is this paradox of outward appearance and inward reality, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of where you went into and part of where I started was, right, is this paradox that I found myself in, which is I was in, let's call it a culture, right? And the one thing I'll call back from your interview with Sean was, your debate over human nature. And then I thought it was interesting. He took it into, well, really, we have to talk about like, if you're talking like human nature based on Western values versus Eastern values. And that's actually, we'll go into that in a minute, right? But like, and also the thing that I've been working on a lot, which is narratives, right? And narratives in the media, how narratives are created and how narratives have an impact on your internal movie that you run, which in a lot of ways is what drives the whole machine, is the narrative, the story running in your head and understanding what that story is, how did it get there, and what are the key underlying, rules of the universe that exist inside your brain. Now you might call those habits, beliefs, something, worldviews. But the skill that you and I developed, or at least I developed, I don't want to speak for you, but when working with a guru, in a lot of ways, I used to jokingly, but not jokingly say like my job was propaganda minister, right? Like my job was to create an illusionary reality and convince people that was, quote, the truth, right? Because if they did, then that means I can manipulate them into buying something. Right? Like, let's call a spade a spade. It was not to help them. It was not salvation or enlightenment. It was for one purpose and one person only. It was to get you to buy. And once you go into that sausage and you start putting those things together, it's really, really easy to become nihilistic about the entire world around you. And that's what happened to me. Is when I started basically putting together, like, and just keep in mind, I started in 2016. So Donald Trump got elected in my first year writing copy, right? And it was like the reality distortion field just kind of became visible to everyone in a way that was not before. Right now, now all of a sudden, people had high levels of distrust in the media, high levels of distrust for government, institutions that require leveraged force by media, right? Requires influencing people at a mass scale through culture, media, news, movies, TV, colleges, right? Like these institutions that are mental shackles, not physical ones, right? And once I saw that, right, it became, and then, you kind of see like, hey, I actually started meeting these gurus who I used to worship. And then I was the one who'd come in and like see their businesses and what was actually true. And it did not look like the projection that either I created or was presented to me. So that's sort of like the other side of the screen, right? It's like when you can see how the magic trick works, it's no longer a magic trick, right? But like what you're being sold is a magic trick, that there is a magic trick. And that if you know the magic trick, all of your problems could be solved because, hey, you're not different than Bill Gates or Elon Musk or these like ridiculous people. It's just your mindset. Your mindset's wrong. You don't want it bad enough, right? And this is the core narrative of the charlatan, right? Is that if it goes wrong, it's your fault because you didn't believe hard enough, not because whatever I did doesn't work, right? And when you see these, whether it's 1099 sales organizations, it's gurus, and it's the 1% of people who are success stories, who like probably would have been a success without that guru, right? But they're highlighted as, hey, these people used my systems and made $1 gazillion. Or what you don't know is that the 1% requires the 99% to be the sucker in that trade to produce the 1% winner, right? And these are these games that were sort of marketed towards people like us. These games that are designed for suckers, right? These games
when you say the games, we talking about the copy game, marketing game. What are we talking about? What game?
All of these games, like the tower, right? That you are to climb toward, the endless tower towards what? Becoming a god.
All right.
Right. The best, right? Number one, perfection. And the idea that there is someone who has climbed the tower and reached the top and did it from, mortal to deity, right? This is the Jesus story, right? Is there is a human who was born and ascended into the heavens, right? That's a super Western ideal, right? And when you look at like the Judeo-Christian impact on marketing in America and the way people believe things to be and the rugged individualism story and like all of these kinds of things that people want to believe are true. And you have, the positive self, like a lot of the stuff is so uniquely American that like, it just doesn't work in like Europe, right? If you were to take this American exceptionalism, think and grow rich, like anyone can become anything, that is not something people believe in the UK because it's such a classist society, right? It's so clearly classist, right? And there's not mobility between classes. So if you take that American rah-rah thing to British people, they will just reject it and say that's not real, right? Whereas in America, you have permission to basically just believe whatever the fuck you want. And then people say, just believe your truth. And now reality isn't based on facts. It's based on how you feel. It feels like it's true. Yeah. And that is the basis of people's existence. So when you have these things, these binds, these paradoxes, what a lot of people are put into is a double bind. So for example, in religion, right, what is the requirement of religion? Hey, you can go to heaven if you're a good boy, right, and you follow all the rules, but you have to want to follow all the rules and do it because it's the right thing. And if you're not genuine about those things, you go to hell. So there's this double bind here, which is you have to be this other person, but you can't try to be like, so you can't get there from here, right? Or it's like, hey, if you're in a relationship, with someone like, hey, you need to be this perfect person, but you're not, and you need to somehow magically transform into this other person for me to give you love. But by you trying to be that person not there, like you can't get it. So like you can never win. So parents do this to their children.
Yeah.
So
can we bring this to ground it down to like a more hardcore example? We're really in the clouds with this one. We've been in the clouds though for a while though. I want to get some
the clouds are important because this is what most people are sold as clouds, right? Is broad concepts that are unfalsifiable, that cannot be challenged, right? So for example, parent, right? Parents want typically their kids to be joyful and creative and have fun, but they also want them to sit still and not talk. So how can the child be both of those things at the same time? They cannot. So now bringing it forward is most people have this problem of they're trying to become someone that they can never possibly become because that person doesn't exist. And their mindset is, I am not worthy. I can't love myself. Like the person I am today is not worthy of love, self-respect, compassion, unless I become this new person that is unachievable. And then basically in your pursuit to become this person, the self-flagellation typically increases and your self-esteem goes down the more success you have, because you have this continued disconnect of like, hey, I'm becoming more successful, but to become more successful, I have to become someone that I'm not. And then that gap of this dual personality, which is, hey, people love this fake thing that I've created, but me, the insecure person, that never changed. I'm still insecure, right? And so we talked about, I'm going to make a really large logical leap of assumption for someone like Tatiana, right? I would bet you that she probably grew up feeling very insecure, probably got teased by a lot of people. Attractive women do get teased, right? That's a real thing. Has probably had a lot of very unwarranted and unwanted attention from other men that she wished she would go away. And maybe these people feel like this thing, people see this, whatever physical beauty is. I'm this perfect woman that doesn't have problems, but I got problems too, man. Right? Like I got a lot of problems. I just am in a pretty shell, and you make all these assumptions about me that are not true. Or this Chris Hemsworth, this Chad guy, like, oh, you're this perfect specimen. Says who? Right? Those people are fucking disasters half the time. Right? They're like just like fucking crazy problems, and those people are insecure too. Right? And so like why are we insecure? Because usually it's what we compare ourselves to. Right? And that coming back to, this thing right here, I didn't have to say anything, and it caused you to feel insecure about yourself for something that's not real. It's like, this is a fucking green screen. This is pure smoke and mirrors.
Calling me out in front of the right? People. Yeah, no, whenever I saw that, I was like, God damn, Jake, you coming up in the world, brother. As soon as I saw it, and before I recognized it was a green screen, I was like, Jesus Christ, with the piano? You don't know how to play piano? Can you play piano?
Poorly.
God, I feel so insecure. I can't play at all.
Yeah.
Well, I want to pause because I want to go ahead and admit where I can come to the middle, because I was definitely like running on a certain level of energy. You make valid points that everybody has internal struggle, strife. Because even when I first hit like 7 figures, right, and I thought my whole life I always imagined like it still makes me feel uncomfortable to talk about in public, but I always imagine like becoming a millionaire, everything would change and go away. And so like I thought you'd retire your family at that point, and then you would like go live on, like you just kind of like buy a nice house, and like it's peaks and valleys in this business. And whenever I hit that, first thing I did is I reset to zero. I walked away from Wealth Press and said, okay, I want to do something new and different. And so I started an agency, and anew, all my problems like renewed. Like I have new problems now, right? Like, so I want to say like all my royalties went to zero. My promos eventually stopped running. Like I have to go back to square one and rebuild it all as my own boss now as an agency. So I have to go back to what it was that got me to my success at Wealth Press to begin with, and Agora, because those promos stopped running, and then those royalties went to zero. It's just like we're in the hit maker business, and when my hits stop running, I gotta do another one. Which is why I wanted to build a business. I want to build something with a little more longevity, something a little longer lasting. But I do think, I accept your point that just because someone's beautiful doesn't mean they're problem free. I guess where I was coming from is like, I don't know, the self-love concept. As a guy who looks at it through my eyeballs and the struggles and shit that I have to deal with, like it's frustrating to see someone with all these gifts talk about I'm insecure. It's like, you're insecure. When was the last time someone said you're too short? You know, like just for existing, you know? Like I've had brutal rejections where people are like, well, you're not a human because you're not taller than me. You're not 6 foot 6 figures, like these kinds of things. And like this shit happens all the time. And I'll tell you what else, like you would laugh, but if I was a woman, you'd be like, oh, pearl clutching. Like for dudes, like they do it all the time. There's tons of videos where like we're talking like physiological things that cannot be controlled, and these people get clowned to this very intense degree, but as like you don't have any sort of recourse. There's nothing that you can do. The best you can do is swallow the red pill and improve yourself to the best of your abilities. So to see someone with all the fucking gifts in the world, you know, obviously got money. You said she's married to somebody who must be a known person. I don't know. Someone who's gorgeous, talking about I struggled with confidence. Like that's like if I like it's the same thing like someone who like if 50 Cent. So if you ever read 50 Cent's books or anything like that, like 50 Cent went through shit, dude. Right?
Sure.
And someone tells 50 Cent like, man, I had it rough. You know, like someone coming like a guy like me, like I grew up poor, it was tough. And 50 Cent's like, psh. So I guess that's kind of how I look at it. When someone who has got every fucking gift and head start in, I guess, at least one department, you know, is sitting there telling me like I struggle with confidence. It's like, oh, you poor baby. You know, and maybe that's cold-hearted of me. Maybe that's fucking surface and shallow of me to look at it that way. But it's like, I don't know, man. I feel like
let me ask you, why? I don't want to get too academic. I mean, have you read like Jung or any kind of like or Freud or any sort of in the last 100 years of psychology and how people have like thought about this? Like this is not a new problem that you and I are uncovering. This has been thousands of years of philosophy has been thinking about these common human experiences, right? And to come back to the power of myth, right, which is something that I've just become more and more engaged in, is that when I look at, again, this paradox of existence, right, when you look at the condition of human suffering and whether, you know, it's Buddha, right, whose message, you know, who was born as a prince, right, his mother died at a young age, so he had whatever early family trauma, and through, you know, decides to give it all up and wander, you know, penniless through the world to find meaning in his life. And Buddha, by the way, is not a title. Buddha is so Buddha is not a person; it's a title for one who is awakened, right? So Bud, right, is the verb to awaken. So Buddha is a noun, right? One who is awakened.
Right. That's why it's the Buddha, right? It's not Buddha, it's the Buddha, right?
He's a Buddha, right? Because we're gonna get way into crazy. So if you go see Buddhas, there's like different Buddha statues, right? And they're different Buddhas, right? It's not Siddhartha, the one Buddha, right? Buddha is a stage of, you know, enlightenment. And I might be speaking a little out of character here since this is not my principal area, but like when you look at, you know, why did this religious doctrine gain acceptance? Well, why did this meme, why does it still exist 1,500 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years later? Well, like it's a meme, right? Okay, meme is a mind virus, right? It's a thought that replicates and spreads. Like that's what a meme is, defined by, I think it was like an evolutionary biologist. I think it was in the Red Queen. Anyway, it was like in the 70s. It was like Richard Dawkins or something invented the word meme or something like that. And part of like the main, you know, thing, right, that you know, these religious practices have sort of come into is, you know, what is the meaning of life? And in the Buddhist philosophy, it's like to live is to suffer, right?
Yeah. That's like my number one tenet. Like if I have like my 3 rules for life, it's like a number one. I've fully accepted that shit.
So you've got that, and Buddhism is kind of like Hinduism, but a little bit less extreme. And when you look at some of these key tenets, right? So like Buddhism is the only, it's like the only major religion I can think of, maybe Zen too, but like Buddhism doesn't ask you to believe in anything, right? There's no forced rituals. There's no forced scripture you have to read, right? Like whereas Western, religion has dogma and canons and super ritualistic, kinds of things you have to do to become this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this like analysis of this human condition and like, well, what do you do with, you trapped inside the meat shield with all of your problems, right? Like everyone has that battle, right? The inside battle, which we all have, and our, external circumstances might be different, but it's like, what do you do with the pain and suffering that is your existence, right? Is there a purpose to it, or is it meaningless, or is there meaning in the pain and suffering, right? You have this real question of who am I and how do I orient myself to the world around me and to the people around me. And then, you have like Christianity, which has not quite that, but in a lot of ways, the story of Jesus is overcoming suffering through acceptance of it, right? Like he is told that his life is going to be the most painful way you can possibly die. Like you're going to die and everyone you know is going to turn against you, speak against you. One of your best friends will betray you and have you sentenced to the most painful death possible that humans have thought of yet. That is your fate. And Jesus didn't run from it. He just accepted that was going to happen. And through the acceptance of that suffering transcends and becomes free of suffering.
That's the story, right? Like this is where I start to see the patterns. The Stoics lived in like historical recounts of like the Socrateses and all the like a lot of Stoics who did basically have this similar outlook and philosophy. They died brutal deaths, right? And it's like, so I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. I kind of am just like, you know what? Fuck that. Like, because this is something I have like a bone to pick with Stoicism now. I remember like just making bitch ass decisions because I wanted to be a good Stoic and I wanted to be Stoic. I wanted to fucking do it. And I got one example that I'm like embarrassed. Like I feel like the things that I did were not manly. Like they were bitch ass moves. They were soft. They were weak. And that's why I got walked on. That's why I received disrespect. And it's like these philosophies, and this is where I'm talking about, like I have my tenets. There's life is suffering. The game is played in the field and needy guys finish last. Those are like my 3 core ones right now. But like one of the things I think Stoicism got right was humor is a very manly emotion. But like I remember I was at the gym and so this had to be over a year ago, almost 2 years ago, because I had to be a copy chief at the time because I was trying to like practice my leadership skills and Stoicism when this happened. And this personal trainers at this spot have a sort of my house mentality. Like I'm the big cheese here. Dude kicks over my water bottle. I'm at the squat rack. My bottle sims. I kicks it over. And he turns, he says, "Sorry, kid," and then just keeps walking. My water bottle's kicked over and spilling. So I pick it up, and I'm like, well, now how am I going to deal with this? Right? Like, again, this would not happen if I was a more imposing figure. But because he is bigger and he's in this domicile of his own, I now have to endure this disrespect. Now I have to decide how to handle it. So, like, this is the thing, man. Like, people, I don't know, dude. Like, no one actually. So we got this. We'll come. I'll fucking finish the story, and then you understand the principles of it. So,
Stoicism in itself is its own interesting paradox.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'm not gonna take it personally. I'm not gonna get mad. And then I'm thinking about like, how would Abraham Lincoln handle this? I'm serious. Like, I'm thinking like, how would great leaders, how would great men, how would Marcus Aurelius deal with this shit? Well, I can't just bend over and just fucking clean it up. Like, I can do something here. So I waited for the dude. Like I did a set and the dude didn't come and clean it up. I was like, hey man, you left a pretty big puddle like where I was working out. You gonna get that? And he's like, I got you in a minute. I was like, cool. So I finished like all of my sets, and then I left the squat rack and I left the puddle, and he didn't address it. So I was like, all right. So I finished like another set or another workout, and I was like, okay, I have an idea. I'm gonna fucking meet him in the middle. This is what I read about in my leadership books, right? In all that. So I go and I fucking literally grab a bunch of paper towel and I walk up to him and I'm like, hey man, how about this? I tore that thing in half. I said, I'll mop up half the puddle now, and you'll get the other half, the puddle right behind me. And I hand him the fucking piece of fucking paper towel that I tore. And I said, I did it. I went over there and I mopped it up. And then I finished the entire workout, and that shit is still not touched. And now I'm kind of like, okay, you're not just disrespecting me, you're disrespecting your own gym by leaving a fucking puddle that you created on the floor. And then the next thing I did is I was heading out, and I was like, this is annoying. And I see the manager and the GM sitting there. I was like, hey guys, I was like, look, I gotta just give you some feedback. Like if I had a guy on my team acting this way to my clients, I'd want to know. I was like, this dude for some reason kicks over my shit and then just kind of left it on the floor. I offered to help clean it up. I asked him to clean it up. It's been an hour. It's still sitting there. So I just wanted to let you know. And I thought about that, like going forward, because I'm sure he got like a talking to or some bullshit afterwards. But then, of course, I see him again later. I see him again, and I see him again, and I see him again. And the weird thing about it is I actually feel like now that I handled it the right way by society's standards, I was like, that's probably like one of the, I don't know, it just feels unfucking manly. It feels like now in retrospect, like, why was I so gentle and passive and then tattled? Like, I'm embarrassed of that story today. That was like 2 years ago. And now today I think back on it and I was like, fuck no. Like, I should have been like, bro, clean this shit up. I don't know what I should have done, which is another thing that frustrates me. I don't know the right answer. But in retrospect, looking back at that passive ass approach, I'm embarrassed of it today. And it goes back to my bone with my gripe with stoicism, my gripe with self-improvement, my gripe with all this passive bullshit. It's not, now when I go into that gym, that motherfucker doesn't respect me. That motherfucker doesn't look at me like a man. Like, if anything, he looks at me as the dude that tattled on him for kicking over his water bottle. Right? Do you see what I'm saying?
How do you know that though, for sure?
I'm sure. I mean, I have to assume that if I fucking complained to GM, the GM said, bro, what the fuck?
All right. And now we're back to the conversation, which is the difference between the way you perceive reality and the way that it is. Right. So like, thanks for so everything that you just shared, like, it's super common. But if you look at these common themes, it is people people feel negatively towards themselves, right? And then they project those things that they don't like about themselves onto other people. And the reason why you get triggered, and this is a Jung thing from the shadow self. Mm-hmm. So you got the shadow self, right?
Right.
And the whole one of Jung's thing, right, is that very literally, right, the way you perceive reality is a projection, right? Like what you see is not real. It is light photons coming into your eyes and your brain projecting stuff onto, technically something that does not exist in a stable form, right? It's a 0 and a 1 at the same time, right? And by you looking at it, the thing flips on, right? This is a photon, right? Or like this is with quantum mechanics, right? Is you have these things that are both, charged, and it's a 0 and a 1 at the same time. So quantum computing, right, is, and kind of the secret of the universe is this paradox, is that things both are and aren't at the same time.
Okay.
Right? Is the universe exists in a state of paradox. It both exists and doesn't exist at the same time. Right? Because there's balance, right? There has to be in the system, because you can't create or destroy energy. It just moves into things. Right. So with Jung's deal on psychology is that when you see people you admire, what you're doing is projecting the things you like best about yourself onto other people, right? In a heroized way. And typically when you see people and they trigger you emotionally by what they're doing, what really is happening is you're projecting the qualities you dislike about yourself most, and it is characterized as a villain in the external world. So you have heroes and villains. So the heroes, people that you admire, reflect the qualities and traits about yourself that you most like. And the villains are the ones that reflect to you the qualities about yourself you most dislike. So now that'll fuck you up, because when you get into things and people trigger you and you can realize, whoa, what this person is doing is reflecting something back to me about myself that I don't like. Because otherwise, why would it trigger you? Why do you care? Why the fuck do you care about what that guy thinks about you? Why does that matter at all? Because something he's doing reflects on something that you don't like about yourself.
This is where I feel like I start to split with this conversation, is that when we start asking these questions, it's almost like a mechanism, this silver bullet of self-love, or like understanding that reality is a reflection of yourself. I agree, because like when I read David Hawkins' Letting Go, have you read that one?
I'm not.
Yeah. So when he talks about like the vibrational charts of energy, like guilt, shame, anger, blah 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 blah.
Sure.
He says like a prideful person will find insult in everything, right? An angry person will find shortcomings and incompetence. A joyful person will find the good. And this sort of holding a mirror up to shit. I think this is where I say, because I did it, dude. I drank that fucking Kool-Aid. I did it with stoicism. No, there is black and white disrespect, like prison yard shit. Like, I don't care what it's like, dude. You kicked my fucking bottle over, and then you walked away. That's what happened. Like that shit. Like, you know, if you fucking run your entire life by the tenets of these books, and even Meditations by Marcus Aurelius was like him trying to like calm himself down, right? Him trying to like go into his inner sanctum and be like, all right, I got a lot of problems. I need to fucking write some shit out. Like he was struggling with things. But it's like there is an actual nature to the world. And it's like it disregards that. And at your own peril, at your own expense, as you steadily move down the chain of respect and the hierarchy until you have a savage, brutal death like the Stoics and all these other like religious people who believed in like being super meek and humble and turning into like this terrible martyr at the end of their lives. And it's like, well, maybe that I shouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe there's a somewhere it's not just like, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like as we get there, if you do this thing where it's like, oh, it's all my reality, it's like, dude, at some point you got to interact with that reality and fucking wrestle with it a little bit.
Sure. Right. So again, right, like the most important questions are all paradoxes, right? And the most important questions have no answer, right? But if we follow the thread throughout this, and you know, this is not going to be a therapy session for Kyle Milligan on YouTube, but I'm just repeating back, right? If we talk about, you know, perception versus reality, right? And we talk about creating propaganda, creating narratives, right? Inevitably, if you look at like take Warren, you know, Blair Warren, or any kind of like how do cults get made, you know, what are sort of the ingredients of kind of like forming a cult? Well, typically how you get followers is you are looking for people who have been marginalized, are under lots of distress, you know, are, you know, people in trauma, people in distress, people who are manipulatable, right? And as part of this, you know, magic bullet of a way out of suffering is you have to, like, if you think about for most of human history, living conditions were horrible, right? So like, hey, your life's shit and it's really not going to change much, but you don't have to suffer, right? You can't get rid of the pain, but you don't have to have this story where every day is like, you can find joy and meaning in your life, even though the conditions didn't really change, but the way you feel about those conditions can. And this is the great paradox, right? is like poor people really don't know they're poor until you show them someone that's rich, right? And so this happened actually in the 70s when we had like the lifestyles of the rich and famous, right? There's a lot of people in America that lived kind of like in the poverty line that were just fine. And then they had these very public displays of wealth where they were now made aware of their relative status. And that is what made them unhappy. It wasn't it wasn't where they're fine up until then. So what changed? What changed is now they got thrown into a game that's unwinnable, a status-oriented game. So when you say things like these hyper masculine alpha whatever, what I see you is you're caught in a game of status, a zero-sum game where there's winners and losers, and if you're going to be first, and that means like someone has to lose where you win. And I got this from Naval, by the way, Naval Ravikant. And the least happy people, you can see them are playing status-driven games, right? Where someone has to lose in order for you to win. So like when you're in this gym and there's this like whatever status hierarchy in this gym, and this guy tries to flex on you to have some dominance, well, if you decide to enter into that game where you're jockeying for position, well, great, you're in it. But the best way to win that game is to just not play it. Because who cares what some fucking trainer thinks about you, or they're just like, it's irrelevant. If you have a solid enough control over your inner frame of reality, like that's just some random noise and it just bounces right off the reality distortion field. But like, here's the paradox, right? A lot of people go through their lives trying to get other people to give them love or attention or respect, but they're unable to give it to themselves first. And until they can give it to themselves first, no amount of outside people can convince them that they're worthy. So that it's this never-ending chase after this attention. You see this with celebrities a lot. They chase after this external validation and it never fucking works. Why? Because they can't give that thing to themselves and it will never complete the loop, right? It's an unsolvable problem. But they continue to chase the external validation versus what we see in all mythology, right? Which is eventually you have to go into the cave, right? Into the dark forest, into the lake in Beowulf and battle the demons within, right? And eventually that seems to be what all religions eventually come to the conclusion of, right? Is that your real battle is on the inside, not the outside. And that your participation in these unwinnable games is the source of your unhappiness.
I really like what you're saying. I think it's profound, it's helpful, it's very useful. I think there is still in me, there is the reality of the state of the world where this idea of being confident. So I agree with like almost all your battles are internal. I remember recognizing this, like it was a shower rant that I had every morning at 9 a.m. And I might have talked about this in a other podcast or something. I would get in the shower after the gym, approximately 9 a.m. I'd be showering, and I was always angry. And so I was like, why am I so mad at work? And I was like, okay. I started writing down like, why am I mad at my job or something? Like, what was I mad about today? Was I mad about today? And I know it's like, I'm mad every day at the same time. And then one day I was mad about something I was going to do and the reaction that I thought was going to come, and it clicked. I was like, I'm always mad at 9 a.m. and it has nothing to do with anything that's happened because I'm mad about something that hasn't even happened yet. I have anticipatory anger about what's going to happen when I send this promo into legal. And I was already fucking tripping balls about, I was like, God damn it, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wait a minute. That fight isn't even real. I made that shit up. The narratives, as you said. So I agree that so much of this shit is internal. However, this is where I fucking put my foot down. Is like, you have to engage the world. And
totally, yeah.
That's the thing. Like when you fucking walk into a room, does what you say matter? I don't give a fuck how much self-love you have. If you walk in a room and you talk and people tell you, shut the fuck up, and you say, they know not what they do, you're still a little bitch and you're still not making progress. You're still not able to go, like, these things are realities.
According to whom? Why are they a little bitch and what aren't they making progress towards?
So that's obviously like super fucking exaggerated thing. But
you've used this repeatedly, right? And you've used it about yourself is this like self-flagellation of I was a bitch. I took the red pill and now I'm not a bitch anymore. Right. Like
it's
like
not
this
that.
unwinnable logic is if
Not
that's
that.
where you start.
What I'm saying is like it's not about red pill, black pill. What it's about is that there is this denial that you have to, like, look at like 48 Laws of Power, like Robert Greene, like these books that are like how do I explain this? Like, you cannot just go to your inner sanctum and succeed in the real world is what I'm saying. It's not
What's
about
the real world.
The real world is we want to achieve things. We want to find a mate. All right. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the real world, brother. You want to get a job and you want to succeed in that job. Then you want to find a mate and you want to have a happy relationship with that mate. And then you want to find fulfillment. And it's like, if you cannot win at some level in finding a job and being competent, if you cannot win at some level of attracting a mate and being attractive, if you can't win certain games, like, that's real. Like, you can't just be alone forever, sit in your meditation chamber and actually find the happiness that's promised in this inner sanctum. Like,
but yet someone has.
You get that. That dude's crazy then, isn't he?
I'm just saying, right? Like the biggest problem with copywriters is we've been taught to describe the world in these absolutes as if things are black and white. They're just not. It's so easy to resort to these simple binary equations.
What I'm saying is it's cool to have the inner sanctum. It's cool to have a level of stoicism. But what I hate about it is when it's the absolute truth. It's like all happiness comes from within. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And when I noticed this is when I decided to start conversations at my gym, because after like 3 years of going there, I didn't know anybody's name. And I realized starting a conversation is too difficult. It's too much baggage. It's too much pressure to start a conversation. I said, I'm just going to wave to people. And when I started like waving to people at the gym and they started waving back, like smiling, and I was like, oh, that was nice. Like, that's an external feedback loop. It's like the credit argument. How do I get a credit card without credit? Because I say I can't have a credit card until I build credit. It's the same thing. Like, where does confidence come from? It comes from positive reference experiences. I don't like this idea of imagine it in your head and then all of a sudden you can be confident. I don't feel like that's reality. It comes from connection. It comes from a tribe. It comes from support. It comes from love and companionship. Like, you can't just self-love your way into it the way that the books tell you can. I've tried it and I found that it's actually like, wow, it's like a fucking jetpack when you get some positive reinforcement from the world, and it matters. It matters that you find a place where you can get that from some sort of external source. And I don't know, like, I think Instagram's an unhealthy thing. I'm not saying everyone should get on Instagram and get 10 million likes, but I think that, like, that whole fucking thing about like you can just do it yourself by yourself in your head, I don't think that works for most people.
Sure, I'll take that. So, but coming back to the original premise here, which is, stories about the world versus so here's the paradox. As a human being, we are incapable of perceiving the world as it really is. It's not physically possible, right? Like, the universe is too vast and there's too much we don't know for us to be so uniquely arrogant as humans to be like, I know the truth, right? It's like, it's part of the human condition. And if we're going to talk about human nature, it is like one thing that seems to be pretty consistent across cultures, time frames, right? Is like the arrogance of humans to think that they know that they understand, quote, God, right? The way that the world works, the laws of the universe, right? And maybe we can have a glimpse of how the machine, this container of this universe that we desperately try to understand, right? But like, we know even less about this thing that we're trapped inside of, right? Like, part of meditation is, where is the self, right? Like, you speaking right now, where is it? Like, I can point to parts of my body and like, this is this is a hand and this is a nose, but like, where is me? The consciousness the ghost in the shell, like where is it located? I don't know. Does that mean it even exists at all? There, right? And that's like the weird paradox of meditation is the ego. Where is it? And if you can't locate it, is it even real? Or is it just an illusion? Right? So this idea that we can somehow see the truth, right? The one truth of the way it is bananas, right? What we see is a story. It's a story about the world the way that we want it to be. And we exist inside of that story up until the story bumps into someone else's story, right? And now they have to battle for which one is going to subsume the frame, right? So if you are by yourself,
I keep talking. I'm going to go grab a drink.
And you are like doing the thing, right? You exist in a world that maybe resembles what our ancestors lived in, right? Brutal living conditions, outdoors, whatever. And you hunt for food and what, like that is the truth. That is your reality, right? Now, in that environment, you don't have to worry about assholes at the gym kicking over your thing and feeling disrespected because it's you hunting animals and no animal disrespects you in the wild. That's not a real thing. So this idea of like, oh, respect, not a real thing, right? It is an artifact of status inside of a human hierarchy of systems, right? So, but now if we start taking these things where again, we have this idea that, oh, the religion we follow is the truth. It is the way. And we are so blindly committed to these things that have to be true. It closes us off from asking questions that allow us to change our mind. And by changing our mind, we can change our story. And by changing our story, we can change the way that we exist in the world that we are in. So like, it is from having come from the other side of selling these types of products to people and understanding that like what people desperately want to believe is that there is an easy answer, right? That there is a way to achieve these, that there are those things and that you can have happiness. But like at the end of the day, all of us are trapped playing a game, whether we know it or not. So when you say the game is on the field, so now the most important question becomes, what games are you playing? Because if you play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes, right?
Love that line.
So like to come back to, some of your things of, to live is to suffer, the game is played on the field and, needy men, but that's in context of a real specific game. That's a status driven game. But like, who's to say that the Western civilization game is the right game to play? Right. So like now we have a communism versus capitalism, right? So like all I'm trying to just bring towards is that all of us are trapped in a story, and those stories are based on key assumptions. And until you can really define what those key assumptions are, it's very difficult to navigate that world because you don't have any anchors in that world that you're in.
I would say like that's kind of what my 3 things are. We could call them key assumptions. The life is struggle, needy guys finish last, and the game is played in the field. I want to point to something here. This guy left a comment here. I still think it's a good idea to maintain a stoic presence, because what would happen if you smash this guy's head in for kicking over your water bottle could have been a lot worse. Now, I have to, like on this podcast, I have a limited sort of scope. I can only like sort of communicate certain. I can only I can only give you as much information as I can speak. But like in my head, there's a lot more to unpack. So one of the things here is I don't think the solution was to bash his head in. I don't think that's the game I'd want to play. So if you've read, I had a conversation with Nabil. That's who, and I was talking about the pimp books. I read Pimp by Iceberg Slim.
Yeah.
Did you ever read that book?
I didn't, but I wouldn't reel down the Robert Greene rabbit hole, and he references Iceberg Slim in The Art of Seduction a bunch.
Okay, I need to read that book. I was talking to these 2 college chicks that had read it. I was like, "How the fuck have you read a book I haven't read?" Like this 21-year-old girl
published 20 years ago. That's anyway, but yeah.
So the
crazy book.
I read Pimp by Iceberg Slim, and I heard about it from Dave Chappelle. So anyway, I read that and I was like, wow, this is nuts. And I got into it. I read like 2 or 3 other pimp books. And what we're describing here, what he was talking about, smashing his head in, that's gorilla pimping. And the pimp game is actually a psychological game. All right. That's
Very
gorilla
much so.
pimping. So a gorilla pimp is a pimp who controls his hoes through physical threat of violence. And that's how he maintains control, through fear.
It's a tyrant.
Yeah, it's a gorilla pimp. And the other pimps look down on this pimp. Like, if there's a hierarchy inside pimps, right? And they think that guy, he doesn't get pimping. Because pimping is a psychological dependence game. And that's why that book is so wild. When you see like the games that they play, it's kind of insane. That's why I was like, I got to read more of this stuff. It's crazy. But that's the thing. Like, I didn't want to kick his head and I didn't want to smash his head in or whatever. I wanted, like, that's what frustrated me, is that I know I didn't do it the way I wanted to do it, but I don't know the way I wanted to do it either. The way I wanted to do it would have been more of a psychological W. Going toe to toe with this fucking juiced up, drugged up motherfucker who can bench press like fucking 700 pounds is not the way to go for a guy like me. But there was some sort of like other sort of psychological approach. And I thought perhaps like meeting him in the middle in that way that I tried to do was that middle ground where it's like, hey man, I respect you, you respect me. I'm going to pitch in. And again, I felt like, I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know because even whenever I had like certain life traumas or life events, I remember texting one of my friends, like, let's say I went through like this harsh situation once, and I texted, I was like, what would a good man do? It's like, I know what I want to do is whatever, like what a good man would do. And I think where I feel like I sort of get led astray is that these very sort of passive philosophies conflate being good with being passive.
Sure.
And
So real quick, I'm gonna be the annoying person here, right? So, but let's talk about that. So you have, so loop this back into some of the other key points. So copywriting and language, right? Language is so important. Like, language is such a powerful tool, right? If you look at like one of the things that have made the human species so successful, like, just think about how crazy this is, that we can like manipulate our tongue and our throat to vibrate the air, and those vibrations travel across, the room and hit this person's ocular center that interprets those vibrations, and then a picture goes into their brain and they do something because you did. Like, how insane that is, right? And when you look at like the human evolutionary thing, one of the things that gave humans a distinct advantage was the language and the ability to communicate with other people of their species, and in a lot of ways to control other people's brains, right?
Okay.
And so like language is so powerful, and the words that we use are really, really powerful as well, right? So when we are writing copy, for example, and we have to introduce a new term, right, because we want to capture a word and what that word means inside of a brain. So you say something like a good man, right? Now that's an identity statement that has a lot of key assumptions into, well, what is a good man? How did you define that? Why is it defined that way? And why do you even want to be one of those things? Well, because in the context of some other thing, those are desirable, right? But this is the paradox. Right. Like this is the paradox of these things, is we say these things of like, oh, everyone knows what a good man is and why this should be one, but it's an unknown thing. Right. And so like these things of a gym, hey, I was in this thing and what happened? Well, the answer is it's irrelevant because the question is meaningless. Right. Like, and like that is the paradox of a lot of our problems, is the answer is it's meaningless. Right. So like, to come back to this situation where maybe you felt respected, I'm supposed to be a good man, right? Like, all you're doing is responding to this story that it running inside of your head that you're trying to pattern match against. And my whole thing is the further away the story gets from who you actually are as a person, the more the suffering increases.
Have you read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza?
I have not, but I think I saw you reference it at one point.
I reference it at every point, like every day, every podcast, every video. But he has a literal graphic inside the book where he talks about the gap, and you've said it a couple times, which is funny because I feel like, with enough study of any sort of field, we always end up at the same points. Like the great marketers always have like the same ideas with different labels. And then like a lot of the meditation and religious stuff that I read is like, wow, they're saying the same stuff like that was in the Bible, except they're calling it the universe instead of calling it God. Sure. Right. So one of the things that you keep talking about is the gap. And that's a big piece of the breaking the habit of being yourself. And I think, well, I agree with you. Like there's a lot of this, like I'm being partly almost purposefully a little bit disagreeable. I mean, I believe all the stuff that I'm saying.
Podcast. We're just like, I agree. Like, what was the point of doing this? It's
just point.
We got to have some disagreement and intention here. So,
So like, there are some things here that I do like. I feel like the dogmatic, like self-help has gone too far. Like that's basically my big theme is like, it's too much like woo woo.
Self-help like being is a product that's sold to people for profit. Like that's inevitably the problem. Like so is religion. Right.
I like that. Yeah. But like, but in Joe's book, like one of the things that he talks about is the gap. And that is the the mask that you wear, and then like how you feel on the inside. Right. And in between is the gap. And every time you remove some sort of construct that you've built for society, you close that gap until you sort of reach like your true self. And that's where like the happiness stuff is. Right. I agree with that stuff. Being authentic. I think, so Nabil put me on this Black Phillip show, Patrice O'Neill, and that guy's hilarious. And he's talking about like, he's talking about like, if I want to have a racial discussion, I don't want to have it with an oppressed person. Like I want to be able to have it with a white guy who's not afraid to say racist things to me, but he can't because society says you're not allowed to say these things about other races. So he'll never have an honest racial discussion with a white man is what he was saying, because the white man will have to censor himself.
Sure.
So he talks about the same thing. He's like, if a guy wants to bang his boss and like, he's got a hot like boss or something like that, he can never just hit on her or be honest. Or if he thinks she's a bitch, he can't just be honest because she's a woman. And now he has to live by these societal rules. And I think that's kind of like where the gap kind of forms is like, we have these societal rules, expectations, how we're supposed to be perceived, how we're supposed to behave. So you and I opened with this idea about your suit. I had a similar suit, but it wasn't like a physical clothing suit. It was the Copy Squad. And then I was like, I feel so fucking confined by this channel.
Yeah.
And being like, so I was like, I want to try to do something a little bit more authentic and close the gap. And I can tell every podcast, every episode, I get a little bit more comfortable. Like on this one, I think this is by far the most vulnerable because I am talking about almost exclusively instances where I felt inferior, where I felt small, and I felt disrespected. And I'm showing like all of these open, vulnerable wounds.
I've got an ebook for $19.95 that can help you with that. And
motherfucker. But yeah, what I was saying is like I'm on that journey that you're describing here. You keep coming back to it, and I one of the books like Caroline just mentioned it over here, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, has really helped me with that. And it's like I think vulnerability, authenticity, like these things are sexy. And I think what it is again, like being vulnerable doesn't mean being soft, doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean wearing your emotions on your sleeve saying you're so beautiful and I love you.
Let's roll back. What does being vulnerable mean and what does being authentic mean? Because a lot of these are staged versions of those. It's people acting vulnerable and acting authentic.
Right. But I guess before we're pivoting, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the gap theory that you keep mentioning, I think is closer to the truth. We're talking about truth and all that bullshit. I think the gap theory, I believe in that. And so what I'm trying to do is like, I'm trying to reach a point where I'm so cool with myself that I can talk about this shit, not be bugged out if someone disagrees with me, not be bugged out if someone calls me like a loser or a beta or whatever the fuck they're going to call me. This is my position on on mental health. All right. You want to hear
all right, let's hear how Kyle gets canceled. Let's see how this.
So here's the mountaintop for me of mental health. And I've told this to my boys and they said it's impossible. I said, I want to get my shit in my brain. Like that talk, that inner monologue, those insecurities, anything that fucking riles me up. Like I always want to, I first off want to be able to I talk about this in the podcast all the time. I think the manliest shit you can do is handle tension with poise and grace. If I legitimately lost my shit on this podcast, that would not be manly. If I have passion or energy, I think that's fine. But if I legitimately like lost control, got emotional, got angry, not manly. So I think the most extreme version of that is to be able to get belligerently drunk without ever becoming like belligerent in drunkenness. So like whenever you get like stupid drunk and you become like this whole like this idea of a sober, a drunk man's words or a sober man's thoughts. This is like my ideal is like, I want to be able to get to a place in my head where you could liquor me up so badly and I would still be like the most good-humored person you'd ever met, because that would mean I've resolved all my bullshit. Because when I was like especially in college, I was like a professional bridge burner, and my phrase of choice was "go fuck yourself." I would just drop a "go fuck yourself" to just like anyone who like waved to me in the street if I'd had like enough drinks. Like just be like, go fuck yourself. Like I recognize this in my 20s. And I was like, I got to work this out. Right. So
sure.
I recognize those patterns in me. And so my struggle up the mountain of like that mental health and getting everything all aligned and all that bullshit. Because I fucking do the work, man. I do the meditations. I read the books. I've talked to my inner child. I take it serious, man. I actually do want to like be a good man, however you want to fucking define it. I want to be in a state of like content with myself and what I've achieved and where I'm going. I do want to do all that shit. So I think it's something that, that's why I think, because I take it so seriously, it's why I have these gripes with like what you're kind of describing, the mechanicization, turning it into a mechanism, a silver bullet, and selling it to other people. And it's all fluff. Like, just imagine your dreams. Go fuck yourself. Like that whole, like, just imagine your dreams and they'll come to you.
Right.
Like, dude.
So now let's bring it again full circle, because we're hitting. Okay.
Right.
So number one, in a lot of ways, what you're describing. So in Buddhism, right, desire is the cause of suffering, right? And that is the gap, right? So when you desire, right, is you're making an image in your brain. It's a fantasy, right? And you desire to achieve that fantasy, and your inability to reach that is what creates the pain and suffering in your life, right? Is there's a mismatch, right? So like part of being present, right, and coming into the now, right, there is no past, there is no future, there's only today. It is getting yourself out of the anxiety where you're stressing about future events that have not happened yet, right? It's kind of the definition of anxiety. Right. And getting into the meat shield, being connected in your body, connected to the right now. And in a lot of ways, when we hear this thing of like compassion or self-love, the way that I interpret it is, do you accept yourself the way that you are right now? And if the answer is no, there are things that I do not like about myself, right? Well, why don't you like those things? Well, we could go through a lot of reasons, but inevitably is you have a version of yourself in your brain that you aspire to be, or the way you see yourself. And you're getting external feedback from the real world that is not how that is. And it conflicts. And there's where the pain comes from. It's like, well, I thought I was like a good person and really cool and super funny. But then I went in there and my jokes all bombed and they told me I was a loser and a short ass. Like, fuck, right? Like that kind of. And so your choice, like, all right, you either just like, nope, that was just, throw that away. Or do you like, man, I should consider that data. And should I reflect on that things? And then do I change the model in the brain of what is really there, right? So you have like, and then you kind of have this nirvana, right? Like this desire to ascend the human condition, to be free of these things, right? And this is the state of nirvana that, has been kind of the pathway of religion is that, in the end, you transcend into heaven where all that stuff goes away. You're in a perpetual state of peace and love and whatever those things are, right? So you have those things. But now the question is why do you want those things in the first place? Because someone marketed it to you.
Love and peace.
Someone marketed
happiness.
the idea to you. That's the real thing, right?
Dude,
someone sold you that idea.
This is some Metal Gear Solid 2 shit. Did you ever?
I never played MGS2. No.
Yeah, at the end where you realize everything is a fucking ad is essentially like even though
it is?
Well, like at the end, it's fucking convoluted. But if you sort it out, you parse it out, like there's YouTube videos just explaining the end of this game. Essentially, like everything he's been doing was run by like AI and run by like even the people he was on the phone with, like during his mission, this colonel and all the support, they were AI.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was all like, we're just basically collecting data about you and how you would react in these situations. And it was like, what the fuck is that? Because I thought I was like saving the world from Metal Gear. But anyway.
Oh my God. That is so amazing. Like so Japanese too.
It's so fucking convoluted. You could watch like an hour-long video just explaining that fucking 10-minute ending. So, but you're talking about why do you want happiness? Because it was marketed to you. When you said that, it was like, oh no. You know what they called it? The La Le Lu Lay Low. That was the organization. That was the evil organization. And it sounds so stupid. But that's what you're describing. The La Le Lu Lay Low. They market happiness to you. Like the books are titled like the happiness theory or like that 1% to happiness or like something like that's why I like the philosophy of no. Life is struggle. It is. That's the reality. The actual reality is you're going to wake up every day. And even in a Western first world society, you're going to have some sort of challenges to your resources and your ability to just operate and be. And that's a lot more like first world problems now. Like, well, can you afford rent? Like, can you like, is your girl hoeing around on you? Like shit like that. Like, but there's always some struggle, no matter what you get to, like what place you reach. And so I reject a lot of this this happiness woo-woo fluffery. And I don't know. Like, yeah, it's sort of marketed to you. It's not actually the state of life.
So like again, so perception versus reality, right? And this I feel like is the ultimate paradox for anyone that wants to go through the copywriting, sales, persuasion, influence pathway towards wealth or whatever.
What is the paradox?
The paradox is most people like, okay, so if we look at sort of the hero's journey, right? Sort of the monomyth story that has persisted throughout time and is kind of like, the story frame that kind of works all the time. Well, why does that story work? Because it describes something that is a human experience that we go through perpetually, right? Which is the status quo, the inciting incident, the call to the adventure, the crossing, it's not crossing the chasm, but it's entering into the new world, meeting the mentor, getting friends, overcoming challenges. And then there's the boon, right? The prize that you've been searching for. But like in all of these stories, right? The prize that they get is not what they thought it was going to be, right? Or they got the thing and what it did was different than what they thought.
Yeah.
Right. And now they have the choice of, do they ascend into the nirvana, right? Or do they take the boon back to, the people to share the lessons learned? Mm-hmm. But if you look at this, right, like one thing that humans are really, really bad at is estimating what will make them feel happy.
Oh yeah.
Right now happiness, by the way, right, is an emotion of many that you can have, and like to be in a perpetual happy state is physiologically impossible. You can't do it, right? Your receptors burn out. You can't handle it. Like at some point, the dopamine stops working, right?
Yeah.
The serotonin stops working. So when you look at like, why do people want to be happy? Well, why are people unhappy, right? Why are people in pain? And talking about the pain and not like, oh, why are you like, these are the real hard questions. And why are you in pain? Is a lot of people that pain is self-inflicted. Right? Like most people that are watching this channel, right, are not in a state of raw survival, meaning like, hey, today is like food, shelter, and water,
Right.
or I die.
Right.
Right. Maybe they feel that way. I have psychological pressures that are putting them into a state of survivalism. Right. But most people are trying to chase this concept called freedom. And then above freedom is power. Right. It's once you achieve a level of freedom, now you get to play power games.
Okay. Okay. So first, like below freedom is, I don't want to call it slavery, but servitude, subservient, and then like you have to break out of it. Yeah. Okay.
Like you have harsh living conditions, like you don't have that, like the third world would be like, hey, a lot of these people are playing the survival game, right? Their biggest thing day to day, week to week is, am I going to have enough resources to feed and clothe and protect my family? Like real survival shit, right? Or right, they are in grueling, physically demanding jobs that are like, really bad conditions. And those people, like, okay, great. That person is under real physical distress. And I don't want to take that away from people who are in abusive relationships or like being trafficked or like whatever. There's exceptions. But most people watching this who have a normal life in the first world are chasing after the next level called freedom, which is this illusion that if I have enough money, I can just do whatever I want, right? Yeah. And then at some point you realize that's not really how that works. And then now when you have enough funds, or now you can play power games. And now power is how you interact with the power structures and other people, right? It's decisions you make about what you do to other people because you have the means to do it at that point. And you can either be a tyrant or you can be, so this is where you have the tyrant leader and the good leader, right? The good versus evil. There's directions that you can go with your choices of power and what you do with that power. You have new choices that you play.
And I love this right here. This is another spot where I have like this very difficult to outline argument about, it comes back to like my gripe with stoicism. And I'm still having trouble. I need to sit down and write this out. But this idea that Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. And I don't know how to put it in my head that makes sense. Like when I say that, that's enough. But like, this person has plenty is kind of what I'm trying to say.
He's the most powerful human in existence at the time.
Right. And it's like, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you have the luxury of being soft and passive because your power is absolute. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's a perfect candidate for stoicism, right? Because like no one will ever question your authority. I mean, he did have some people try to he had several wars. He did. But
sure, like, he has his own problems in power games and courts. But yeah, so here's the paradox, right? Yeah. Is it's easy to talk about, fasting on a full stomach, right? It's easy to meditate in a cave where there's no humans around you and be in a peace of serenity. Where it's difficult is in the periods of adversity, can you maintain control of the meat shield long enough and your emotions to respond in a way that's useful to what you want to achieve, right? And if we come back to like a lot, in my experience and in my own experience, right, the major source of a lot of my unhappiness was I was chasing an idealized version of who I should be because someone sold me that dream because I didn't have anything better.
Is it the suit and tie Jake? The Jake I met years back?
I mean, even still to this day, but like think about the six-figure copywriter, right? Like what was the dream I was chasing? Is that with enough money, I would escape the mortal boundaries of my life, right? I would have, I would be free of something inside of me that I've been trying to run away from forever, right? Some version of like, hey, but the solution I've come up with because it's convenient is if I just had passive income, right, I would be free of the pain that I feel on the inside. Now, the sick joke is you just advance to new pain, right? You just get new problems. So when we talk about like, so what is really the critical question, the fundamental problem that people have, in my opinion, is that they don't have a strong enough vision for themselves, right? Like their internal character is blurry, and they're not willing to say, they're not willing to be honest with themselves about what they actually want, because it's like a hard thing to do. And if they are, right, they're not willing to give up the known suffering, because people become addicted to their suffering, to move into something else, right? And I would say that there's a lot of people who don't actually want to be happy, right? They're fine being miserable. They just want to be validated.
Because it's they want to be, well, maybe they want to be comfortable, and misery is comfortable.
So like, I don't know, we're going to move off topic here, but so the thing that I've kind of learned through this process of someone on the other side, I've sold products to a person of a variety of wealth states who in some way or another are unhappy with the way their life is, or there's a problem, and want to believe that I have a magic stock pick that's going to make them rich and solve all their problems in one shot, right? Like that is their honest and true wish. And being a marketer, you get into this paradox of, I can deliver the message that does promise salvation, just like a religion can. If only you believe, and if only you copy my trades, and if only you are in this, like if only you had this fire that I've stolen from the gods, you would be a god too, right? But knowing that that is a lie. And this is where, people get trapped in these golden handcuffs of like, as a copywriter, there's really nowhere you can make as much money as you can in financial publishing. That might be less true today with some of the regulations, but like for all
regulations
of our career,
and the market taking a shit right now. Yeah, it's been a bitch.
But think about for all of our meaningful career, right? Like there is no way you can make as much money in any other niche than as you could financial.
Okay.
Right. So what happens when your reality, right? Maybe what I'm doing is actually harmful to other people. Harmful.
And I want to preface this because you've said it several times, or I want to suffice this. Like there are plenty of really strong gurus out there with great track records who do produce market-beating returns. It's not that every guru who sells a financial product is doing anything harmful or devastating to their readers. It's because there's plenty of testimonials that we receive like, hey, man, I made $1 gazillion in this trade and it's been great.
Sure. Right. Exactly. Right. So where things get complicated is at scale. It's really difficult to understand your net impact, especially when your product is speculative, right? It's not like, hey, I produced a drug that, when you throw it in your mouth, like one of these 7 things is going to happen, right? Like, hey, you have a disease, you take this thing and the disease gets like, hey, here's some amoxicillin, or here's some penicillin, or here's some fucking whatever. Like the disease goes away, right? Like nice binary, like it worked, it didn't work, or maybe there's some side effects, right? Like those are like, hey, I can promise this thing, I can market what this thing does, and it's pretty stable.
Yeah.
With investing, it's speculative, right? And the paradox of investing is the more people know about it, the lower the returns are going to be. So if you're like, hey, I want to help all these people through this cool newsletter, well, the paradox is the larger you scale, the less people you can help, because the returns will collapse. They'll mean regress. Or people that are early in negative Ponzi, right, will have gains at the cost of the subscribers who came in later, and we're the back, right? So it's like, it's really difficult to know, right? And so all of us have to tell ourselves some kind of lie that we are a good person doing a good thing so that we can get up and go to work that day and continue to live in what is a brutal reality, right? Mm-hmm. And this is where I think like the challenge becomes is at some point, and I've seen a lot of people who are like wealthy but very unhappy. And in my estimation, it's become at some point like you kind of pull the curtain and you see the Wizard of Oz behind there. And now you have to make a choice. Do I, quote, do the right thing, which means sacrificing this, material lifestyle that I can now afford through this income, or do I give that stuff up, which never made me happy in the first place, to pursue something that I find the work being meaningful? Because to your sense, right, at some point, if you walk away, right, what do you have left, right? Those royalties go away. That business eventually goes out of business. So like, what do you have left if not your self-respect for feeling like, hey, at the very least, I did something that I feel proud of. And that was in a lot of ways the thing that I was searching for in my own life was I made it to a certain level of success. I thought I was going to be happier, but I would say, at the height of my public success at Agora was probably when I was the least happy in my career.
Let me ask you something. In that snapshot, I think that's an interesting place to like put a magnifying glass for a moment. So in my pre-show like notes and description of this, I said the sometimes friendly Jake Hoffberg. I took little did you see that?
I'm sorry. I didn't pay attention to that at all.
All right. So I posted the Facebook thing. I said, hey, next guest, the sometimes friendly Jake Hoffberg, because you have a reputation for being brutal to just basic abrasive. And now I wonder a couple things. Like, is this I mean, I know you're a big softie. You meditate and shit, drink water all day. So is this part of the character? Is this part of like the character that you were playing? Or was it a symptom of this unhappiness that you're sort of describing? Or is it just like, no, that's just who I am? Like, that's kind of the question, like those three things.
It's probably a little bit of all of it. So if we look at, so if I look at sort of my evolution, it might mirror yours. Is one of the things I learned from it was Radical Honesty, Brad Bland's book, was that our biggest fear is that if people were to ever like truly know who we were, they would reject us.
Yep.
Which is the paradox, right? Which is desperately what we want is for us to be loved and accepted for who we are, but we're deathly afraid to show that to someone for fear of they will see it and I will be right and I will be unlovable because there's something broken within me, right? So I have it, you have it, just like we all have some version of that. And so what do? Right? We try to become someone that people will like. The gap. Right? The gap. Now, here's where this paradox is, where people are like, oh, just be authentic and be yourself. Well, what if your entire life experience is that person, no one likes that person. So like being myself means suffering more, right? Is more pain, right? Like, hey, just be yourself. Like that's, the thing that girls tell you, like, great. That's great advice for super hot guys that you're attracted to. And you wish that they would talk to you in a different way. Not this dude who is how you perceive is beneath you, right? Like that person's not good enough for you and him being himself is not going to cut it.
Right. So like I just did, Steal Our Winners, Rich Sheffrin's program. Yeah. I just did one on Monday. I'm in Steal Our Winners, y'all. Go to strategicprofits.com. Check out your boy's new lesson. And one of the things that I talked about in there, I said, write conversationally is one of my most like peevish copywriting pieces of advice. Like when someone says write conversationally, it's the same problem as be yourself. Like
what if you suck at conversation?
What if you're a shitty conversationalist? What if your self sucks? And this is where I was actually going to bring this up earlier. You mentioned this, like there's a distance, a gap in who you want to aspire to be, and the world does not give you feedback that you are that person. And in a way, I find that to be healthy. Like I feel like saying, okay, I've got work to do. Like if I were to be content as the books and everything tells me I should be, why the fuck would I get up? Like where does the motivation come from? I do think that there is a bit of creative energy and juice we have just from even in a place of contentment. But I feel like a lot of achievement, and especially, well, I'm about to do the whole gender thing, especially for men, is like women are and men are becoming, right? Like I feel like as a dude, like you have to prove so much all the time at so many different levels. But that is why we have progress. Is why people do self-improvement. It's why people go to the gym. And like, I think that's healthy. There's some self-loathing, a little bit of self-hate, can actually be a healthy sort of dynamic to help you become a better person, that you can be proud of yourself and say, look what I achieved. Look at the abs, look at the PRs at the bench press, like all this stuff.
I'm going to connect my journey to yours because I think you're going to see the parallel. So right. Growing up, right, like I was not popular. I was not good with women. I had a speech impediment. I was in braces for like 6 years. Like I was intelligent, but I was like very low status for like most of my life relative to my peers. But where I found status was in really niche categories. So in music, I was like one of the best people in, I was certainly the best in my pond, and maybe even the best in my state. I went to college. So like I had, this weird status mismatch where like in my normal day-to-day life, I was low status. And in this very specific context, I was very high status.
This connects to me very deeply.
Right.
This connects to me at a very deep level.
And I repeated this pattern in other places, whereas like I had something that I was really good at that I was rewarded for, and I was acknowledged for being someone, and that made me feel good about myself. And so I would lean into that harder. But like I was still low status in this other, just, my age peers in school, for example. And I was nice, like I was all those things. And then I went to college and I'm like, I'm going to become I'm just going to rip this thing out. No one knows me here. And I'm just going to be someone new. And what I did is I, started reading Tucker Max. And so I was like, I'll just try that because that seems to work. And I just tried that personality. And the worst part is that got me better results than being the nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
So now I was in a situation, and now this is weird, right? Is in a lot of ways, the world rewards sociopaths. Right.
Yes.
It rewards people that have these abnormal mental things that are divergent from normal humans that allow them to do other things.
That's the flip side of the coin, where I was talking about the Stoics having these brutal lives. And then I thought, well, maybe there's a different way to do it. And like, you just nailed it. The other side is actually, Tucker Max has a book called Assholes Finish First. Tucker Max, for people who don't know, wrote these short stories about him just absolutely, like, if you think Andrew Tate is misogynist. Yeah, if you think Andrew Tate is
go read I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, and like, a book that cannot be written today.
Dude, and like you said, like the dude, this is the same thing, like Wolf of Wall Street is a perfect example in my eyes, because the dude conned hundreds or thousands and thousands of people out of their retirements, absolutely brutally destroyed their lives. And he's idolized. He gets a movie and Leo plays him and gets all these awards. One of the worst human beings to walk the earth, destroyed all these elderly people's lives by fucking absolutely scamming them to the death. And this is something I said in another podcast. I said something like, the world hates to be conned, but they love con artists. Like, nobody but they also be manipulated.
Story, right? What's uniquely American and Western is we all love a redemption story, because we all love seeing people fall from their heights and then having the redemption arc afterwards. It's a very Western thing.
Okay, but yeah, so you play Tucker Max, and I was like, oh man, but you're like, holy shit, this works. This works. Being sociopath. You know what the dark triad is?
It's been a minute, but like I've heard of it. I don't remember.
I know what it is. I'll tell you what they are: psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. Okay, so for definition purposes, narcissism: I'm the center of the universe and I'm the most important thing. So think of that. Sociopathy is like the inability to feel for other people. Then Machiavellianism is manipulation. So I have this idea that I'm number one. I am a manipulative person, and I don't feel bad. So if you have that, it's called the dark triad, and these dudes just swim in poon. Like, because they can do and say and be whatever they need to be without remorse. There's nothing. And apparently they are like, I remember coming into like reading articles about this when it was like a hot like marketing term. But apparently, like, these dudes, like, it's just endless options. But it goes back to that Tucker Max thing. It's like this idea of, all right, I think we're getting closer to what I try to say, because I don't know how to box up my message yet. I don't know how to box it up and say this is my message. But what I've been trying to say when I say life is struggle, needy guys finish last, and the game is played in the field, is that these fucking, like you talk about it, like these magic bullets packaged in these books and courses about happiness and all that bullshit. That's not what gets rewarded. That's not the people that move up in our society. The Stoics lived brutal, terrible lives and suffered painful deaths. Like that's what I'm saying. Like, wait a minute, these are our heroes. They never win, like, unless, you say, oh, Jesus went to heaven. But like, the people who win are the fucking Jordan Belforts.
And worse, right? And so like, and to some degree, so again, this comes back to like, what game are you playing, right? So if you're playing the game of power, I think what most people are unable to understand is that like, there's definitely evil in the world. There's definitely malice. Like, there are definitely people that are fucking gnarly characters. And if you don't learn how to fight evil, right? And this is why these narratives are so stable, is because like, if you think about it, like from an evolutionary perspective, and like, so what does genetics try to solve for? So if we look at an ecosystem, right? In a complex ecosystem where there's lots of stuff going on, and like a small change can have a power law distribution of effect on the ecosystem. Because of the amount of variables, it's literally impossible to predict the future, right? Like there's just too many things that could happen that could create too many changes for you to say, I know what will happen. So from an evolutionary perspective, the key for species that win is they have both resilience and optionality baked into the species, right? So like if the ecosystem is kind of doing like one of these things and it's slowly moving, well, then the genetic pool needs to have enough variation in it so that like, hey, we have enough things, like if something changes, like we have something that could adapt to changes that are coming. Mm-hmm. So that's when you look at how evolution works. So like, so there's super stable species like cockroaches, alligators, sharks, who are extremely resilient in the environment and persist over time, right? But like with humans, where you see this, right? Why do we have genetic mutations? Why do we have, like, why is it that, like 1% of people would be clinically diagnosable as having psychopathy, or so like being an actual psychopath or an actual sociopath, not demonstrating narcissistic behavior, like straight up, it's not there, right? The empathy does not exist, and there's no fear mechanism, right? Hyper dangerous motherfuckers.
Right.
Well, if you look through history, those people serve a purpose. They serve a really important purpose in humans, right? Like it or not, humanity needs those people, because someone has to make the hard decisions, right? And in a lot of cases, the people at the top have decisions that are column A, 500,000 people die, column B, 501,000 people die. Which one do you pick? Someone dies no matter what you do. And you're like, fuck, I got to make a decision. And I have to be able to make a lot of these every day. And if you had to carry the weight and the empathy of those decisions, you would never be able to operate at that level of power required to lead whatever. Also makes for great criminals, right? But like to be like, these are abominations of nature is overly simplistic, versus like, no, the reality or an evolutionary purposes is like, as you climb the ladder, as you climb the tower of the martial arts thing towards the final boss, those motherfuckers hit back. And if you don't understand what those people are, so like, let's talk about America. So if you're doing American business, right? America does business a certain way, right? There's a certain decorum and expectation that you would have as like an American.
Keep talking, I'm listening.
Business. If you go to Russia though, right, the way Russians negotiate is like bullying. It's like all the things that we would find like inappropriate, right? Is the baseline tactic for Russian negotiation. And you go to China, and then China is like, part of their negotiation strategy is to openly lie and to sign contracts they have no intention of fulfilling, right? So like, when you see this, like, holy shit, there's like whole societies who are organized in a different way, around different values with different things, right? And you see, okay, so we're in America, and what does the American system reward, right? Well, it rewards the narrative of rugged individualism, right? It rewards the narrative of of the self-made man, right? It rewards these rag to riches stories. It rewards a really specific type of person. And again, if we look at like corporate America and corporate, like these things, who winds up at the top of those power structures, right? Like it's a pretty predictable series of people. And those people, right? Like, how did they get to the top? Well, they probably stepped on a lot of bodies on their way up there. And like throughout human history was probably the case, right? Like, every country is on a history of violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So divergent. How do you know?
I think he's asking, how do you know what China and Russia do? I think that's what he's asking.
I had a conversation with Oren Claff yesterday, and he was telling me about negotiating with Russian billionaires and Chinese. So that's where that came from. But again, like if you look at all these things of, we exist in these games, and if we're in the game called climbing the corporate ladder, right? Like as you climb the tower, in order to keep winning that game, right, you have to make choices, right? And a lot of time those choices involve the state of other people, right? They're power games going up. So now you have this weird paradox of, okay, great. So do I choose to climb the tower and play the game and try and reach the top and then change the rules of the tower? Or do I just not play at all? And I go play a different game. It's harder, right? It requires you making you have to step out of the matrix and live in, quote, the real world or a different reality. But like, these are the choices we all have. Is we believe we're locked into these power structures, and to some degree we are, but like you do have an option to exit and go survive in the wild. Like that is a real thing you can go do. Right? Like you don't have to play these games. You don't have to be a productive member of society. Like you don't have to do any of those.
I think, so that requires a certain level of transcendence, which is not useful in my opinion. I mean, in a way, it's like
but pimps
play
make
the
that
game.
decision already, though. Is pimps play a different game, right? They don't play the game that we're indoctrinated into, where you go to school, you become a productive worker, right? Like typically people who we admire most are the ones who are divergent from that narrative, right? They break away from that thing to achieve something.
I'm not arguing that point at all, because that's kind of, I feel like I'm kind of I think that I agree that you have to step out of like the overall societal thing, but I think the game you play is about the context of which you wake up and you go like, do this, do that. One of the things that you touched on earlier, which I really enjoyed, was like, I was very powerful in one spot. I was very high status in one niche area of my life, or in this one niche thing that I did. And this was something, and I told you this resonates with me. This is something I've talked about a bunch. I get on YouTube. I go to a marketing thing. I talk to copywriters. You go toe to toe with me, I'm Mike Tyson in there. Like that, I've got that shit. But then I wake up and I go outside of my house, and I go to the gas station.
Yeah, you're just some random asshole.
I am some random asshole. And what's worse is like there are these constructs in reality, in the zeitgeist, that actually push me down the chart before I even open my mouth, before I even begin to do things. What's funny, you said that thing about being a walking pattern interrupt. I love that, because you said Joe called you a walking pattern interrupt because you were wearing the suit. It's funny because it's kind of almost what I've sort of developed
that's
into
what peacocking is all, right? This whole idea of the pickup artist of peacocking, it's a pattern interrupt. It's
right.
And so like I got into, it's better to be different than it is to be better, right? That's like you've read the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, Al Ries, Jack Trout's book from like
the
70s, 80s.
It's new and different is always better than better. Yeah, I've heard that.
So that's like law number 1 of that book.
Yeah,
right.
New, easy, safe, and big. Nesby's number 1. You got to be new and different, like hands down. You got to be different.
So like in a lot of ways, I have really used that to my benefit. Is that a lot of the character of Jake Hoffberg that I built was designed to be high contrast from my surroundings. So like when I went to college in the Midwest, right? And, there's a lot of things I like about the Midwest, but one of the things is, their fashion is not exactly West Coast, right? So everyone's wearing jeans and polos, right? So like in this peacocking sense, like how did I give myself, like appearances matter. I'm not going to say they don't. And, if you walk into a bar and you look the fucking identical to all the frat bros with the pop polo, the pink, whatever, something, how are you going to stand out from across the room and create, interest, grabbing attention and interest? Well, clothing, appearance, you don't even necessarily have to be, attractive. You just have to be different, right? So I would wear crazy clothes, right? Like ridiculous belts, just like I just nonsense, complete fucking nonsense. Why did I do that?
So did you do the pickup? Did you study that stuff and
yeah, I went really down that rabbit hole. Same thing with seduction. And then, again, same thing with copywriting. Like at some point, there's this real problem you have to get to, which is like, man, this stuff works on really insecure women. And now I'm kind of like a sexual predator and there's these people are victims now. But like, that's the reality is like, dude, what you're learning how to do is be a predator. That is the very uncomfortable truth with some of that stuff.
So, I mean, that is using your own sort of philosophy. That's a label. Okay. What does it mean? You are influencing. So there's degrees of this word: predator, manipulator, influencer. Like there's a scale, and those words all mean the same thing.
And
they all
prey
mean the
on
same
some
thing.
drunk girl to have sex with her and then leave. Like, I mean, that is predatory. Like, I'm sorry.
That's an intent statement. Like, if you want to maybe find love, it's a different ball. It's a whole, like, I'm trying to make myself the most attractive to attractive potential mate or long-term partner.
If your goal is to ship a promo and make as much money as possible, there is in there an element of predatory. You're willing to be predatory. Right?
I see it all the time. I got to deal with it too. I got to dudes, I can't be having these fucking over the top. Like, I feel like my reputation goes on the line if we have these fucking crazy promises that are fucking hyperbolic and promising.
Yeah. So now, now in one area, right? If we took the dark triad, we would not care about that at all.
Yeah, right. We'd make money. I'd be swimming in money and pussy and booze. And...
Exactly, right? Because in the dark triad, what is at the top of the value pyramid? Power, control, right? So like, as long as it's in pursuit of increasing my power, then I will do that. Fuck all those other people. If I have to step on them, they're just NPCs, right? And when you look at sort of these decisions, right, at some point, there's a decision like, hey, I will willingly sacrifice money to, quote, do the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. And eventually, like, this is this problem with power is as you acquire more power, it requires, great power requires great responsibility, but like most people are not equipped to deal with more power, especially not a lot of power all of a sudden. Right. And one of the problems with like a thing like copywriting, it's one of the very few things where you realistically can go from not making a lot of money to like making six figures relatively quickly. And so what happens with new money, right? Ego inflates, you have this new sense of money thing, you start spending and you're like, oh, I've made it to like the next level. And usually, and I had this, was like, it was a desire to be better than other people is what was driving a lot of these decisions. And so dressing differently, rising through the thing, marketing myself, like in a lot of ways, it was to satisfy, for most of my life, I was low status and it was very apparent to me that I was low status. Like it was well marketed to me that I was low status. Right. And so from that old wound of being a low status person, and I get angry and say, well, if the nice guy thing doesn't work, then I will breathe fire instead. And that works to a degree, right?
I mean, that gave me little tingles there. Like that was badass. Like my brain space rewarded your presentation of that. Like, if the nice guy thing doesn't work, I will breathe fire. That's fucking dope. I like that. I don't know why, but I was like, that's dope.
But it's also a decision you see a lot of upset, insecure men with no purpose make, right? So like, why do men wind up, and this is going to be a weird generalization, like, why do they go into gangs? Like, why do they turn towards violence? Because it's an easy way to feel important.
Okay.
Right. Like, violence is an easy way to feel like you have some level of control, especially in a gang where there's like no real, it's a bunch of adolescents who are trying to fend for themselves. Right.
Right. I'm going to give you a bit of pushback here. All right. That, because like you gave me pushback about like the stuff that I said about the water bottle, whatever. I would say that's a hyper simplistic view of people who actually are living in an environment where survival is the daily thing and the easiest way to survive. I don't think it's about necessarily feeling big and bad, but like, this is where I feel safe and I know I'll survive in this group. Sure. I have to pick a group. If I'm not in a group, I'm fucked. Like, so the safest thing I can do is decide, well, I like that group a little, I hate that group a little less than I hate that group. or you get like, I wouldn't say it's so simple as to say they want to feel powerful as much
Fair
as
enough.
they want to like not die in the streets. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, right. There's always a paradox, is nothing is true all the time.
Fair.
Right? There's usually an exception, and that exception is what kind of creates the structure, right? Because there's usually divergences from law. Anyway, so like classical if we look at Newtonian physics, right? Like that stuff breaks down at the subatomic level, and you have to switch to a different thing because your map doesn't match. Anyway, so like, but to the point, so like if we look at probably a lot of men who are watching this type of content, whether it's Jordan Peterson, it's Tate or whatever, in my estimation, because having been, a lonely young, upset, sexually frustrated chump or whatever the thing is, and even though most people would look at me and say, what are you talking about? You're like a 6 foot tall, good looking white dude who can play music. Like, what do you mean you have problems talking to women? Like, oh, woe is me. It's like, but for me, the problems were real, right? I had like real things. And so like, in a lot of ways, right, the easiest thing is the sword, right? It's easier to just be violent, right? It's just easier to hit back, right? Like it's just easier to do it that way. It's just like we're copywriters, right? It's easier to go for greed. It's easier to go for just raw gains claims. And it isn't until you develop some nuance and understanding of other people that you realize that there's other more powerful ways that maybe not on the front end, but like they do a way better job, and it allows you into an access of like a different version of reality. So to the sense of, coming back to, me being sometimes nice and abrasive is to some degree, right? That has been my Achilles heel for a long time because my ego and abrasiveness in a lot of ways has prevented me from making sort of meaningful connections with people that would have arguably advanced my career, provided a better social life. Like there's a lot of things that I missed out from going sort of that brutal alpha male route. But, I made a decision where I was going to sacrifice everything else in my life in pursuit of my career. And like I made that trade, and to some degree I still have. And, like it or not, when I try to be nice to people, things don't get done. But as soon as I fucking yell at people and give them hard deadlines and do that, just like fucking magic, all of a sudden things happen. Yeah. Right. And so, I, in my own journey towards, going through leadership positions and having my own struggles of, I have a certain level of drive and commitment, and like I have some of these things, and being able to be like, oh, you don't have that. And that doesn't make you a bad person. And it doesn't make me like better than you on this humanistic level. It just means you're different. You have different motivations. You have other things that are important to you. And if I continue to run this hyper combative alpha male, I have to win all the time thing, well, at what cost? Well, if no one wants to play with me, they don't want to invite me back to the games because like, fuck that guy. He's not fun to play the game with. Well, then long term I lose because I don't get invited into the games where I could be actually the most effective because I have a high degree of skill in the things that I'm good at.
That's kind of where I feel like it's kind of crazy because we've talked about this, like the con men and the narcissists that seem to be rewarded by our, at least American society, how they keep getting opportunities to be con men. Like the Gecko story from Wall Street, the movie Wall Street, right? Yeah. It's like, how does this person keep finding ways to get back in the game? Like everyone should know, don't touch this. This is a bad, toxic person. But that's like people who like are just, I don't know if it's like a halo effect of like someone who's just like a beautiful person. Like how do these people keep finding themselves in great, perfect positions to fuck over other people?
Because that's what they're good at.
Right?
Like again, like what people don't realize is what I've noticed is that one of the unfortunate side effects of people that are like psychopaths is they're usually really intelligent. Right? Like it's a bad combination, right? Where it's like you're extraordinarily intelligent and not empathetic at all.
Yeah. Isn't it sort of like it's almost like a teeter-tottering sort of tipping like scale of like EQ? But then again, isn't psychopathy, aren't they also like they know how to fuck with your emotions? Like, don't they know how to do it? And like,
I'm not a psychologist, but from the best I can tell, right, like the clinical definition of a psychopath is like an inability to feel empathy for others.
right.
And because of that, it allows that person to act with reckless abandon. And typically there's like fear inhibition as well. So it's like, imagine you, and this is where people are having, I think I saw a book about this, like the biggest problem with normals is that they can't imagine what it's like to not feel empathy, right? But a psychopath can imagine what it's like for you to have emotions.
Right. He can say like, well, this person's limited by like, it's like Batman Joker. Like Joker knows Batman will never kill him. Like he knows that Batman has rules and Joker doesn't have rules. That's exactly the conversation we're having here.
Yeah. And it's like in the face of these extremes is where all of our values become tested, right? And this is the Batman Joker thing, right? Is Joker's game is not these things, well, at least in the movie, right? Joker's game is, can he get Batman to break his rules, his sense of justice, to prove to Batman that you're no better than I am. You're just like me. You're a killer, right? That's who you are. You're just some scared little boy under the suit, right? And in a lot of ways, we're talking about this self-worth thing, right? So we have this challenge of, well, you have these desires, you want these things, and to some degree, like we live in, for better for worse, you live in America, you live in the Western world, like you live in those values, you live in that construct, like you live in that game, whether you want to play it or not, right?
That's what I was trying to say earlier. Like what games we choose. You talk about exiting the game. I feel like we're social creatures. Like we need community and connection. That's why a lot of this parasocial shit happens, like with OnlyFans, right?
Sure.
It's like an immediate, obvious, like, because the person's just, I mean, they're collecting dollars to be nice to you. And that's why I feel like you can't really escape certain games. Like you're playing a social game all the time. And I think that, well, now I'm talking in circles or whatever. But yeah, like you said, we're playing a game. It's a product of your environment where you are. Like when you go to the gas station, when you go to a bar, when you go to the grocery store, like you're surrounded by people, like, and especially in like social context, going to parties or going out to the game or going out to this or that. Like there's all these mini games you're playing and like your social dynamics and stuff like that. And they can't be ignored. They can't just be stoicismed away. Like they matter.
Yeah. By the way, I just found this comments tab and like, oh my God, there's so much cool shit happening in these comments section. I feel mad that I've not been reading these.
I pulled one up over here. I was going to talk about, I have my own thoughts on this. This is Divergent Hustler asks, would you agree that as men, we take authority by being in our peak physical performance? This will also allow us to be pattern interrupts in our everyday life. I think my answer to that, we take authority by being in our peak physical performance. No. I don't think so at all. I think it helps. But no. Like look at I just mentioned Patrice O'Neal earlier. He's like a 6'5". This is just from what I've heard. I'm not sure exactly how big he was. He was apparently a big man, like 6'5", like 200 and something odd, 300 pounds. Not in peak physical performance. Not in peak physical. Like, do you think he could run like a fours flat 40? Probably not, right? But he was the alpha in the comedy space. I watched like a little fan-made documentary about him last night, and people just like worshiped the ground he walked on. Other comedians just thought he was just the guy, like the most authentic, the most honest, brutally honest, the funniest. He was the leader. He was in charge. So you asked about authority. No, like he was large, but he was not in peak physical performance. I think you can max that out, but it was not a requisite.
So what's the keyword's pattern disrupt or pattern interrupt in our view life. So I'm going to try and not be as frustrating as Jordan Peterson by like, let's define life, right? Although I have resorted to some of that trickery here. So let's talk about games again, right? Because we keep coming back to this and it's a part of it. And I'm working on, I'm working on other products. So like a lot of this stuff is, me working through some things that I'm, writing about as we're going through here. But if we look at for the most part, right, in my experience of selling products to people like the people who are watching this, is you have a narrative running in your brain that defines your values, the world you live in, and what you should be doing to lead a meaningful life. And the biggest challenge is that, again, most people did not decide those things on their own. It was marketed to them, or they were indoctrinated over a period of years and decades to believe that that's how it is, right? And the hardest part for people is to consider that maybe there's other versions of reality and there's other possibilities that, like, the way that I believe things are, maybe they're not. But like, this is sort of the beginning of self-reflection, is your ability to interrogate and ask questions compassionately and ask yourself and to challenge your own assumptions, right? And so when we say things like, would you agree that as men we take authority, like in context of what, right? I don't know anything about this poster. Right? He looks like a young man from The Thing, right? So I remember when I was in my 20s, right? Like, what was I mostly obsessed about? You know, fucking bitches, right? And most of my life in one way or another revolved around me trying to go up the status hierarchy to get better sexual selection if I really had to do it, right? And so all of these behaviors that I is exhibiting, in my opinion, was in reaction to my lack of success early on in my life in a way that caused me a lot of pain, right? My inability to be successful with women sexually. And to some degree, even socially, like I just did not have like female friends growing up. So it was like this like alien species that when I saw them triggered these very uncomfortable feelings inside of myself that I didn't know what to do with. Right. So instead, you know, I took the sword, like, I will suppress this feminine energy under this pickup thing and control them and, you know, show them who's the man, like whatever. So we look at like, okay, well, why do you need any of these things, authorities? You know, somewhere in here, you are playing a game, and it's really important that you're honest with yourself, right? Am I playing I am trying to start a family, but like, what is it you're solving for? And in a lot of times, what you'll find out is these other questions are meaningless, right? They're not important because it's someone else's game that they're trying to get you to play where you're the sucker, right? And this is what people don't realize is there's a lot of stuff in the world right now where you are the exit, right? Like, and their strategy for winning requires you to lose, like a casino, right? Why do people go to casinos when they know that statistically they're going to lose, right? But the casino requires the suckers. So they have to get the suckers into the game, right? And in a lot of positions, we don't know this, but we have been sold, hey, come to the casino, try your luck, climb the ladder, right? But that ladder, that game is designed to benefit and extract value from you for the people who made the game. It's not designed to help you. So you think of like self-help, personal development, right? There are religion, right? There are elements to things that can help you, but over time, power structures form. You know, successful people have success. The weak get crushed. Like, we know these things, and the hardest part is identifying, right? Like, am I playing a winnable game at all, or is this a game that I cannot win?
Does this mean you agree or disagree?
Well, it says, would you agree that as men, we take authority by being our peak physical performance? This will allow us to see a pattern disrupt in our everyday life. Well, you can't interrupt patterns unless you're different from something known. So what is the daily life that you're in that you're trying to disrupt?
Yeah, well, I just don't think being fit is that fucking novel. Everybody's fucking fit now. Like, it's fucking nuts.
It helps. So here's where we do things, right? Are you trying to be in peak physical performance because you think it will make you more attractive to women and increase your sexual selection? Or do you want to be in peak physical performance because it makes you feel good?
I'm sure based on just the name of his profile, his picture, and the question, this is about the alpha male dominance and obviously like the girls. That's how I'm assuming that's the context in which he's operating. And like, here's the way I look at this. Whenever I teach NSBE, new, easy, safe, and big, these are the the big four selling emotions. If I can convey a sense of something being new, something being easy, something being safe or credible or trustworthy, and then it giving you like a big impact in your life, something transformational, I can get you to sort of buy anything. All right. These are the value drivers. Me and Sean had like a little debate about this on our podcast. And when I teach people NSBE, the first iteration of their understanding, when they become consciously incompetent, conscious competence, conscious incompetence, they start saying the words new, easy, safe, and big, like in every line of copy, as opposed to sort of living that this is something new and revolutionary and breakthrough. Because I can say revolutionary, I can say breakthrough, I can say groundbreaking, I can say earth shattering, I can say, historic. Those all convey new, right? But subtly as a subtext. And so when I see a lot of folks getting into the sort of alpha marketing and the alpha game and the red pill stuff, they look at the concepts just like the new people coming into new, easy, safe, and big. Like, I have to be peak physical performance. It's like that's the on the nose interpretation of what it means to be alpha. For me, I view alpha. I was sitting at a cigar bar the other day. The door opens, bing, 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 and someone walks in, and someone says something like, "Jerry, you motherfucker!" And Jerry walks in, and everybody's like, "Hey!" And Jerry's the fucking alpha, right?
Yeah.
Is he in peak physical performance? No, he's fucking 54 years old in a flower shirt and a visor. Jerry's the fucking man, right? And people think that this whole alpha thing is about being like this young, virulent, like sexual, like supercharged gorilla man. And it's like, dude, no, that dude that just walked in the fucking door is a G. Like, and it's not because of this like very on the nose thing. It's about presence, confidence. Like, I think charisma and humor are so important, like, to being a pattern. That dude was a pattern disrupt, because I was sitting beside the manager of the cigar bar. I always, like, when I go in, he sets up his laptop in the corner where he's doing all his books and work and planning and stuff. I bring my laptop, I set it up beside him where I work, and I'm writing, doing copy stuff and smoking and drinking. And whenever Jerry came in, I said, dude, that's how I want to walk into a cigar bar. Like, and that goes back to that status thing. Like, that's.
Are you reading the comments, by the way, right now? They're really funny.
All right, I wanted to get strong because I was tired of being physically weak. So I'm gonna go through them.
It gets crazier. All right, cool. All right.
But Sean says this, like, dude, when I first started lifting weights and like going for doing protein shakes and shit like that, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. People were like physically displacing me, or like people would literally pick fights with me because I was physically smaller. Like, I was a small guy, and I just remember, like, why are you being mean to me? Like, I remember like a dude walking up and just saying some rude shit to me just because he knew he was much larger than me. And that could be the only explanation, where he like was like, just like, get the fuck out my way. And I was like, why, bro? Like, I wasn't even like trying to be in your way. I'd have got out of the way. But I got bigger because of that environmental feedback. Like, and I was like, fuck that. Like, I'm not taking that shit. I clearly recall Sean losing the NSBE argument. Sean says, shout out to Jerry. Jerry is my wife's boyfriend.
Everyone wants Jerry to poke their wives. All right, we'll probably pull that one down before we get kicked off YouTube. Hey, this has been great. So let's just wrap this up here. We've gone 2.5 hours here. I need to get some other stuff here on Friday. This has been awesome. But I think, like, again, as I've sort of tracked my own journey over the past, let's call it 20 years. So Wednesday was my birthday. So I turned 36 on November 2nd. Well, thank you. And so I went down the road. So David D'Angelo, Double Your Dating, right? I bought that ebook when I was like 16, 17 years old. And like, that book in a lot of ways kind of sent me down like the path of personal development, because Evan Pagan, whose pen name was David D'Angelo, a lot of it was about yes, I know you want to meet these hot women, but eventually like it requires you to become a better man to be more attractive to the women, and not like being like the magic wizard who can speak the right words to manipulate a woman into sleeping with you. And then, eventually that goes away. Right. And you're still the asshole or the insecure, boy that was not, you tricked this hot girl into liking you, and like, and the spell wore off, and now you're the evil wizard who captured the beautiful damsel. Right. And now you're the villain in the story. And I used to do, again, a lot of the things that I did were very much driven towards a desire to, have more sexual selection, because a lot of my thing was I wanted, now this was a weird head fuck for me, was really the problem was my relationship towards other men was where this came down to. And that like in male status hierarchies, I was low status in those. And I thought that, if only I had a really hot girlfriend, then these men would give me some level of status and respect, because I would fit into what my male at the time social group valued. Right.
That's interesting. I bet so many people, I bet that fucking hits home, dude. That's fucking interesting.
And that becomes weird, right? You see the same thing with women, right? Which is like, do women dress up to impress men or to impress other women?
Dude, that's good too. These are good things. Like, I think you're right, because like
men don't care.
I don't care about your big fucking fake eyelashes. I don't care about your fucking 7-inch long nails. Like, this shit does not do.
But other women do.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and you see like on Instagrams, like the nastiest people to women are other women. Right, like they are like, you think men are misogynistic? Like, watch a woman tear down another woman, and like you do not understand how brutal that is.
The thing is, women, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. Women have no repercussion for things that they say. Like people talk about this, like the threat of violence always exists.
They have less than we do. That's true.
Yeah, like
they do have repercussions.
Really though, like
they really do.
White knights will always white knight a hot broad. Like, no matter how nasty or bad or evil she is, like society always seems to like quickly forgive and forget in those circumstances. Like, ask Gina Carano. Who's Gina Carano?
Again, right? Like there are always limits to what men are willing to accept from women, right? And women, and especially what women are willing to accept from women. The point of this was when I started to get into the root of, why am I seeking attention and validation, and who am I seeking it from? Were like real key things. And then, I use this later on to manipulate people, so that makes me a piece of shit. But if you look at like a lot of people, right, they typically have a couple pretty predictable traumas. And when you know what those are, it's really useful. So like commonly there's going to be familial expectations of them, right? So like a thing that they're going, like that they have conflict with is maybe their parents have a vision for what they want their child to become, but the child does not want that. And so maybe it's like going to the right school, getting a certain job. So this would be like the kind of the classic, immigrant story of my parents wanted me to be a doctor and I chose something else. And my parents have never forgiven me for not being a doctor, because it would make them proud, or it would make them higher status to other parents. So that's like a weird thing, right? Parents in a lot of ways care less about their children than they do looking good to other parents in the social group.
You're naming so many important things, like the games that we're playing. Like, men want hot chicks not for themselves but to impress other men, and you're saying like women wear makeup not to impress men but to impress other women, and you're saying like parents want their children to be successful not for their sake but to impress other parents. Like, these are really cool little dynamics that you're pointing out.
So I know this because I used to sell educational products to parents, and in a lot of ways what really wanted is they wanted their kids to go to the right college so that they could feel like I'm a good parent. And that, and Jimmy, well, Jimmy's going to Harvard and my kid's going to Tennessee State, right? So like, I'm a less good parent because my kid didn't achieve a level of success that these other kids did.
Have you ever seen Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
No.
Oh man, well, there's just one character, Aubrey Plaza. By the way, Aubrey Plaza, smoking hot babe. Aubrey Plaza plays this one character where everywhere Scott goes, like if he goes into any sort of business establishment, Aubrey Plaza is the person working there. and that's and that's how I feel every time we bring up a new topic. You're like, I know, because I sold toddlers shoes to parents. And you're like, I know, because I've sold helicopters. I've sold helicopters to billionaires. I know. I was on the phone yesterday with Oren Clough.
Exactly. So, but these are really important when you understand that, like, why are people doing things? And for a lot of times, it's to get the approval of someone else, right? And like that fucked me up for a little bit when it's like, so you're telling me that the reason I'm in this position is because some asshole over there is insecure and had to make me feel like a piece of shit so they could feel better about themselves. Right? Like that's fucked up, right? So my parents made me suffer my entire life so that they could look good to their friends.
Is this a me thing, or are you speaking the editorial me?
An editorial me, right? But like, or whatever, right? Like, hey, I grew up and had to do these things that I did not want to do that my parents chose for me. Right? Kind of the source of all our trauma, right? But again, like, look at this. So if we look at, so where are the common dynamics? So, for me, right, growing up, well, you grow up typically in your gender peers. It's typically how you grow up, right? Boys with boys, girls with girls. And so, you have this like important dynamic with your peers, and, you don't want to be outcasted from your peers. So, you try to fit in with your social peers, right? That's kind of your first version of that. Okay. And sometimes, right, that does not match with what your parents want. So you have like a conflict of, that. And then you hit puberty, right? And you start to develop kind of feelings for the opposite sex. You're like, oh, this is weird and complicated. And then now you got to deal with like that thing, right? And that's all fucked up. And where I started to read.
And when you say deal with it, are you talking about start changing, like, and morphing who you are, like in a manipulative way? Like, is that what you're getting at?
Consider when you're a child and you're ignorant and you can kind of be free and obviously not in all cases, but for the most part, like there's the blissful ignorance and happiness that only children can have because they haven't yet run into malice, right? They haven't been confronted with pain, with like, other things that are like, oh, my parents aren't perfect, right? Oh, right. Like fairy tales aren't real, right? And you kind of become more disappointed. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it doesn't really work that way, right? So like as you get older, you start to just like, you have more reference points of like, oh, wow, like this is not exactly how I was promised this was going to work. And so when I started to see this, so this happened whether I was selling products, I was trying to recruit people. And it was like, okay, the thing that I know is going on in your brain in this buying decision is what will my parents think? What will my spouse think? What will my kids think? Like, what will other people think of me if I do this? And again, that is useful and relevant because you exist in a social relationship in context of your peers. So like, yes, there is a real importance to do that, but like, it's a paradox, right? Mm-hmm. But like the way to get status, right, is to not need the approval and attention from other people. So like Jerry, right? So this is the paradox of these people is why are they popular? Because they don't need it. They don't want it. And that's why they get it. And so like the paradox of trying to improve yourself to get other people's attention and approval is the only way to win is to stop playing that game and then you get it.
Good. I like that. It goes into I'm going to give you because I think it's important that we put some examples to these philosophical. This is something that drives me nuts about like 5 tips to persuade people or 5 tips to be more charismatic. Is they never give like examples. They're like, oh, have you ever tried mirroring their body language? But no one's ever been like, one time I mirrored this girl's body language and she banged my brains out like that night. It was crazy. Like there's never like any like real world like demonstration of how this is super helpful. It's always like some psychology studies say people like people that mirror their body language. But the idea of stop playing the game. So one of the things that I did was this was a social experiment of sorts where I did the unbuttoning of the shirt. I don't know if you heard me talking about it. I wore a fucking flower shirt to a salsa night and I had my shit all unbuttoned as a gag. And I noticed, like, as a person who's been alive for 33 years, I noticed like tonight I had more conversation than I typically have. And I said, well, what's different? Maybe it's the shirt. So the next time I went to the actual bar with real people, not just salsa dancers, but like I went to the other bar, I wore the same shirt unbuttoned, and I felt kind of fucking insecure about it, but that quickly vanished as I started to recognize I was having the same volume of conversation. And then I went to this bachelor party, and now I'm fully in on it. I mean, I'm buying in.
Now your shirt's all the way open and you
see my belly button and shit. So like I'm at the bachelor party and they're giving me shit. And I think honestly, the manliest shit you can do is endure tension with poise and grace, humor, good humor, endure tension. So, if I had to say what's a good man now, today, having lived 2 years into the future, from my last story, that a good man is someone who endures tension with poise and grace and good humor, right? So they're giving me shit, and we're about to go out, and they're giving me so much shit about my shirt. It's funny, it's hilarious actually, because they're witty and it's funny shit. So one of my friends or something's like, dude, are you really gonna wear that? Like, really? And I was like, bro, let me just lay it out for you. I don't want to look just like you and all these other people. I want to look different. And I just said that. I was like, look, I get it. Because everyone was joking. We're laughing about it. He's like, dude, seriously, are you not going to change or button up that flower shirt? And all I literally said was, let me be real. I don't want to look like you. And when I did that, that conversation ended there. And then later, I can't remember if it was that night or the next day, because we were drinking pretty heavily. But I do remember him pulling me aside, or we were alone together or something, like somewhere where people couldn't hear us talking. He's like, dude, I thought about what you said about the shirt. I respect that. I won't give you any more shit. And it was like you said, I exited the game and I said, I don't need your approval about my fucking shirt, guy, and he's my bro. Like, there's no malice there. I'm just like, I don't need you to approve of what I fucking wear. And this is what I talk about in the podcast a lot, that attention, the word tension is inside of the word attention, which I think is neat. But like when you get attention, the ballerest thing, like, so you're a pattern interrupt. When you're a pattern interrupt, just because of what you're wearing, be it a 3-piece purple suit, be it a shirt that's unbuttoned to your navel, you draw attention. What you need to do when you have that attention is handle it with poise.
They're just going great.
He's trying to look like Jerry. He wants men to want him to. This is getting out of control over here.
This is just going off the deep end at this point.
Right. So, like, you got Jake to LOL. What the fuck was I even saying? Oh yeah, so like the game, in my opinion, like the game of life, is being like so cool, so calm. You got shit collected. You got your head and your humor in the right spot, that you can invite attention and then say, like, I don't, like, when I was watching that Patrice O'Neal thing, the reason people regarded him so highly was because he burned bridges in the name of not selling out. He burned opportunities in the name of being authentic, even though he wouldn't bow down to executives. He apparently, like, every time he got in a room with executives, he would just start grilling, like roasting them. Like, if he got in a room with like people that could give him open doors for him, apparently he just burned those bridges like within the first 15 minutes of any meeting that they had. But that's why all the comedians respected him, is because he was above the game. And Patrice O'Neal said he respected Charlie Sheen because Charlie Sheen was making $2 million a week or whatever, doing 2.5 Men.
Yeah.
And he said this dude had all the reason in the world to continue doing what he was doing, keep his mouth shut and just do his job, make $2 million. And then he didn't. And so Patrice O'Neal said he respected that guy. And everyone else said they respected Patrice O'Neal because he was a guy who didn't play the game. So what Jake is saying here, I think this is important because it gives context to what seems it's very theoretical and philosophical about not playing the game. But there are examples in the world of people who garnered immense respect and clout and that kind of alpha status that Hustler was asking about, Divergent Hustler. Where'd he say? Yeah, about like being, he said fucking
it's physical performance.
Yeah, something about being strong. But yeah, like these things I would say it's more important to behave in the way that Jake is describing than to have big muscles. Be it in a way where you are above the game itself. And there's different examples of that. Like you can find them if you look.
Yeah. So like I agree with you on the practical things, and I'll address this. And I know, so we had like expressed like, let's wind down this conversation, right? Opens up like the most interesting part of this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at, again, like what I think I've been chasing or my own journey through personal development and, in therapy and dealing with my own problems, because, my life's not perfect, is that it is accepting the paradox, right? And being able to look at these double binds and unwinnable games and being willing to choose to not play them, right? And so like the double bind, right, that a lot of us find ourselves in is we're presented with two and only two options. But the reality is there's usually a third and fourth and fifth one that has not been revealed to you, but you have to come up with it yourself, right? In the yin yang thing, the Tao, right? You have the middle, right, between the black and the white, the line through the center is known as the way, right? The Tao, right? And so a lot of what seems to be things humans have figured out is you can't be just, yin, you can't be just yang. There's this fluctuating balance that you're managing the paradoxical forces because they both exist at the same time. And your ability to exist in both of those states at once is the Zen, right? Is the being present. So whether it's, being, like anger, hate, these other emotions, and love and whatever, it's like you can't just be one or the other. You can't have light without dark, right? You both have to exist at the same time. And the challenge is balancing those things inside of it. So if we have attention, right? Our desire to get people's attention, right, is paradoxical because in the beginning, you're like, hey, no one's giving me attention, so I have to get attention. And then at some point, once you have attention, you have to take that attention away in order for the desire to increase, right? And so when you look at these things like, hey, the paradox of status, right, is typically the highest status people are the ones who don't want it, because they're the most appealing people, because they're most stable in who they are. Whereas people who are constantly seeking attention, you can tell, right? So it's like, I went from a decade of doing things to try and get attention and to make people like me. And then now, like, I work out because I like it. I like going to the gym. I like putting pressure on my body. I like, sometimes it hurts and it sucks, but like I do it because I want to go work out, and it's just what I do now. It's not, I don't have this extracurricular motive about I have to work out so that I can be in this shape so that I can be better than other people or whatever. I'll give you another example. I used to do morning routines religiously, right? I would wake up early. I would do fucking Wim Hof breathing. I would do whatever.
You say used to, like, are we talking like years ago, months ago?
I like just do an experiment is, well, I was like, okay, the reality is like, I'm just not getting enough sleep. Right. And so if I'm doing all of these, if I'm waking up early to try and get myself motivated and whatever, or I could just sleep an extra 2 hours instead and just do that. What I found is that just sleeping more is way more effective than me getting up and doing this very convoluted morning routine to get myself in the zone to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking weird, right? And that's a weird one to be like, oh, wow. So you're telling me like I could have just like not done all of this stuff and just slept in and I would be happier? Survey says so far it's true.
I can second this because as a creative worker, like my brain is my muscle. Like I need my brain is the thing that I dig the ditch with, right? Like when it comes to writing and especially as a copy chiefing is super taxing because I'm not just writing now. Now I'm dissecting the problem and then I have to generate a solution, and that is fucking difficult. That's why I think as a financial copywriter, I have a nice solid moat because it's a difficult thing to write a financial sales letter.
Yeah, it's high barrier to entry. It's great.
Financial copy chief, motherfucker. Like you think you can go toe to toe with me and copy? Like now come with me into the chief ring, and like now we're in like, I'm in a handful of 5, like on planet Earth at this point. Like in copywriting,
and I might be the other one, and I might be one of those 5,
right? And like in
and Sean Mack
copywriting,
might be number 3, right? Like,
right. That's an arena where I put in more reps, more time. Like I still do it to this day. I have like 2 coaching groups, and we do calls and all this shit. Like it's like the brain, though, the point that you're making about sleep, I got on a tangent. I was hyping myself up. I didn't mean to do that. The sleep thing, I recognized like I'm actually better if I sleep till 10. Like if I was up too late, like it's almost more important I do that than anything else. Because then I've found there are days that are complete wastes, complete wash. Because I got 6 hours of sleep and I was like, I got to get up so I can finish this. And I have like 30 minutes of like a little bit of juice that I recouped overnight. And then I'm just spent. I can't do anything the rest of the day. I'm just sitting there like looking at my screen. And then next thing I know, how did I get on YouTube? Like, how did I end up watching an hour of YouTube? I don't even know how this happened.
What I'll do is I'll over caffeinate. So here's one thing I've figured out is that as much as I like coffee and caffeine, I'm really sensitive to it. And too much caffeine, it fucks me up. It makes me angrier. It makes me more emotional. And, and it's so anyway, so like to the point, why was I doing this morning routine? Because at some point someone told me you can't be successful unless you have a morning routine, because all these successful people have morning routines. So like, again, I got looped in this weird fucking thing. And I just said, why am I doing this? And I just rejected that and said, what if I try something different? And instead of getting up at 6:40, I just sleep until 8 and I don't work out in the morning and I don't do these things. What would happen? Shocker, right? Like I feel a lot better. Alex Ramosi is so mad. Well, you know what? He can go fuck himself with his $100 million offers and his hot wife and his whatever. But the point being,
why would Alex be mad though? Because I just watched a video on him the other day talking about morning routines. He's like, I hope I have to go against someone who's stuck to their morning routine, because if anything goes wrong in their life, I can beat them. And I thought that was a really good video. Why is Alex mad?
I don't know. So I threatened to wrap this up, but again, I think you agree with something cool. So then don't fuck Alex Ramosi. Great guy. Love Alex. My Trumpian. But like again, right? These are these weird things that like, we get ourselves tricked into this, right?
I get it.
Like we get ourselves tricked into doing these things. Why? Because I want the approval of Andy Frisella, because I can do 75 hard, and like if I get Andy Frisella's approval, like I'll be a man and I'll be something. Or like, hey, or this idea that if I only just did more yoga, if only I meditated more, like I could like be a nicer person, right?
Yeah.
These things that we do because someone marketed to us, when it's like, what if the answer was option 3, just sleep more?
Right.
It's like not these other things that you think. Like there's a completely different alternative to this that you've not been willing to consider because someone only presented you with 2 choices. So this is the classic trolley problem, right? Which is, hey, you got a trolley, or like what's called the boat problem. So you're on a boat, your ship sinks, and you have a life raft or lifeboat that can hold 10 people, but there's 11 people there. So choice A, you let that person drown, the last person drown, or choice B, you pull them into the boat and risk killing everyone. What do you choose?
I guess the option C is like you just stay on the boat. I don't know, let 10 people go.
So correct, right? So the correct answer is, hey, option C, something else, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's you have people take turns in the water and while you wait for help. So I really like comic books for a lot of reasons, but I think it's a great visual medium.
I like turtles. What a segue.
And one of the ones I was reading, this was presented in the case, and it's like a martial arts one. And so his answer is, so he says, so he's in like this test situation that's real. And he says, so you're telling me to pass, so like you're telling me these people are in danger because of the ocean. And they're like, yeah, then great. I choose option 3, destroy the ocean. And he fucking he cuts the ocean and splits it in half. And that's how he beats that problem, right? So crazy divergent thinking that is so outside of what's there. But that was his answer, is, so you're telling me that the problem is the ocean, then I'll split the ocean. Option 3, right? So like that's refusing to play the game, right? If someone has put you in, you're going to have 2 options, both of them you lose. And my option is, fuck that, I'll destroy the game. or the Kobayashi simulation in Star Trek, right? Like it's unwinnable game. How does Kirk win it? He changes the game to something that can be won. And all I'm saying, all of these things, recognize when you're in a situation where you're in an unwinnable game and the right answer is to break the game or to not play it at all. And that's how you win.
That's dope. Can you summarize for me what happened with Kirk and Kobayashi?
Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen it, so the Kobayashi Maru is a simulation for Starfleet commanders where similar situations, so they're on their thing and they've received a distress signal from a down ship in Klingon territory. So option A, but like if you go and do a rescue mission and you enter Klingon territory, you'll start a war. So option A is let the ship die, right? Or option B, risk a war to go save the down ship. And it's unwinnable. Like the computer simulation, so people will try and win and try to replay it. And so Kirk just reprograms the game so that it allows him to put up shields that are unbreakable from the Klingon folks. Like, so he just resets the rules so there's conditions where he can now win in this unwinnable game. And that's how Kirk beats the Kobayashi Maru simulation, is he changes the rules of the game. He breaks it so that he can win. And in all of these things where we're selling secrets, we're doing whatever, right? It's like we're locked in. The appeal of these secrets is there's a way to break the game. There's cheat codes that allow you to just skip that hard shit and get the winning without that, right? And so what I'm saying is the way to win these unwinnable games and to get the status and the power, it's a paradox, right? That the way you win the game is to stop playing it or is to break the game.
I feel like if someone thinks long and hard enough about someone that they respect or admire, they probably respect that person, or that person stands out to them because they refuse to play the game and decided to break the game.
And if you look at Chappelle, if you look at Patrice, right, in a lot of ways, what makes those characters attractive is their willingness to break the game at the potential detriment of themselves, right? Like there are real consequences for Chappelle doing what he did. There are real consequences for Patrice, but they said, fuck it. I'm going to do it anyway because that's who I am.
And that's the sort of not giving a fuck that Mark Manson defines in his book, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, is like, you got to give a fuck about something. And it's like that, what he proposes, you give a fuck about your values and your principles. And for Patrice, it was he called it righteous, but he said not in a religious sense. And I think what Patrice was onto was the idea of authenticity, but he called it being righteous. Like, I just feel righteous in what I'm saying. Like, he believes in what he's saying. And Dave Chappelle, he also had to take, like you said, he had to take the consequences about this and go with what his values told him. That's, you give a fuck about something. And Mark Manson says, give a fuck about your values, and then you could sleep at night. And this also, Jake, on a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about, you have to sort of derive your own values and not play by the values of other people, or else you'll get sucked into their game. And often it's an unwinnable game because it's based on their values and not necessarily yours. So you end up on a losing end of, like, either way you go.
Yeah, like the worst thing you can do is get sucked into someone else's status game because you're there to lose so that they can win. Like that's the reality, right? So like at all possible, you want to play games that are, so like you want to play a non-zero sum game, right? So a zero sum game is there's a fixed pie and you're competing for the fixed pie. Those are status games, right? There's fixed statuses, right? You have 10 people, only one can be number one, right? And you're ranked. But you want to play games where it's non-zero sum to where it's additive, right? The more players that play the game, the better the game gets for everyone, right? And those are the games that are hardest to find, but are the most rewarding. And so like this one right here, one of the things that's great about this is I'm not pitching anything and neither is Kyle. Like there's nothing for sale here, right? So there's no pressure for us to show pretense to try and sell. We're just here having fun, right? Like we would have had this conversation if there was no camera on. We would have just talked for 3 hours about all these things. Like it would have been the same. And in a lot of ways, that's what makes these long format interviews interesting, is that because there's no agenda, it allows for a game that is winnable by everyone. Like everyone can win watching this. No one has to lose. No one has to give up money. Like there's no secret that we're hiding from you. There's nothing you have to buy, right? It's like, this is a fun game that I would come back and play because it was enjoyable, right? Low stakes, right? It was fun to do. And, I think both of us can walk away feeling better. Like no one had to lose in this call. Right? I didn't have to come in and boss you to make you feel worse about yourself so I could be higher status, and you didn't have to do the same. We could just show up like, great, let's just hang out. And anyway, so I know we're going on, and a lot of these things are going to be rehashed of other books, but this was super fun. I think we got to get a rematch with you, me, and Sean Mack here at some point.
Oh, do it. We could have like a panel or something like that, right?
He could bring his nerd books, and I could bring my nerd books, and you could just tell us that we're nerds and insult us, and then it'd be great. And then you can be the alpha in the whole thing, and we can.
Then I can win. Then I can win. I'll bring you into my house to lose,
and then you can be better than us. Yeah, and then you can show everyone how awesome and what a man you are. It's gonna be
right.
Awesome.
What's crazy is I'm low key. I'm just all the things that you guys reference. I already I'm aware of it. Like I know I'm low key a nerd. I've read all this stuff, and I'm agreeing with you. I just call you nerds when you bring it up first. It's super easy. So
well, so here's the fun paradox, right? Is like most copywriters I know that are good are wildly intelligent, and then we all have to put on like our cool outfits. But like if we go into a room, it'd be like 5 hours later, we're debating page 7 of Nietzsche's book or something with Sean and whatever. But like again, right, this is the fun paradox, is when you really meet these like larger than life personalities and gurus, like they're just fucking normal people. And some of them are sociopaths. I'll give you that. But like most of these people I've met, like you hang out, have a beer with them, like they're just fucking people. They're regular guys and gals. And you're like, oh wow, like you're not this personality thing. Like, yeah, I'm just someone.
I think something that kind of wowed me early on was some of these people who have millions of eyeballs on them because they're in the direct response game, like a guru. And just the fact that they have, I don't want to call it an ego, but I don't want to call it insecurities, but they have a bruisable ego. And it's like, I thought in order to be in front of 10,000 readers per day in a promo where you're like, buy my thing, I thought you had to transcend that shit, and they don't. They still carry that shit around. They still draw certain lines. Sort of like what you say, I got to tell myself I'm good in the morning. They draw certain lines. Like, I won't say that shit. I'm not a shill. But it's like, dude, have you seen some of the shit you said?
but you will say that for enough money is the reality.
All right, Jake. I feel like I've got to officially cut you loose. I got to let you go, or else I'm holding you hostage forever. I really appreciate you coming on. I had a good time. It's a good conversation. And I appreciate part of what I like about this is whether you meant to or not, maybe you were just in the right place at the right time. I feel like you were the first show where I feel like I honestly went to the next level on my own sort of authenticity and got more vulnerable with the audience. And I'm glad that you were here and could facilitate that. And part of being vulnerable is saying things that are arguable or fallible. And you called me on the points that I made. Like when early on, I said something about Tatiana James. No one's ever been mean to her. And you called me on that. Like things like that. Like, so it was cool for me because this was a unique experience. I've done podcasts, I've done YouTube videos, but I've never just said something that could be like, most things that I say, I choose carefully to not be put in a controversial position or in an argument that I could lose. So I feel like you were gentle with me in that regard, because there were some things that I just kind of blurted out saying, like in my head, like, let's see what happens if I say this shit. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and again, like, so just to kind of come back to this nerd thing, I think one of the things that I figured out is like, most people that watch my stuff are also nerds, right? Mm-hmm. And I think like the greatest gift we can give people is to help them feel okay about who they are today, right? Mm-hmm. And some of that is revealing like, hey, guess what? I'm a nerd too, and I was 4 years ago, and I still am. Right. Like I didn't like advance past my weird dorky nerd thing. Like that's still very much me. Like, I still have all that. And the more that I've kind of just leaned into that, it's like, oh, wow. You mean I can be a weird nerd too, and I can make money and do that? It's like, you can too. You can be a fucking weird freak show like me and also be successful. You don't have to fix anything, right?
Yeah, like honestly, like look at these motherfuckers making all this money online. Do you really feel like, I mean, there's so much nerd in it. They're in forums and fucking comments, and like they're nerds too. They're nerds. Like, yeah.
Yeah, like these people are not better than you, right? And just like get that away that like, you know, you're better than other people as like a human being of existence, or they're better than you. They're not. Like they're just not. They might do other actions that produce other outcomes, but like you just stop, right? And like the source of your suffering is you see an image that's been marketed to you as something you should want, and the biggest way to get out of that is, you know, you need to have boundaries, right? And this the sooner you decide who you are and what you want and what's right for you, the easier it becomes just to be like, nope, not taking that, get that out of here. And like that's the only secret I've ever found is like the paradox of, you know, the way through your insecurity and hurt and loneliness and whatever is just to be okay that, hey, some people won't like me, and it's painful and it's hard, but like if I don't be who I am and I have dishonest and false relationships based around someone who I'm not, then like I'll never have the opportunity to be with someone where I can be accepted for who I am. And like for me, you know, and I deal with this all the time, right? Like we all deal with it, but like that is the magic that's difficult to capture on camera, is someone who's like so comfortable just being a normal person and a weirdo, the courage to be disliked. And in a lot of ways, I just decided that like me as a person, I am controversial, I am contrarian, and I do have a certain style and approach. And I just decided like very low probability I'm going to fundamentally change my personality. Like that's really hard to do. And if I just say that's just who I am, but in certain situations I can really excel in certain games. So just go play those games and just stop playing the games where like you suck at it and you're a loser. It's not fun and like you're never going to be good at it. Like that's a recipe for failure in your life. So like go do something else. Just play a new game, right? Stop playing the games where you lose all the time and go play ones where you can win. And that's been my only secret.
All right, then. I think that is going to be the note to end on. Thanks again, Jake, for coming. 3 hours. I'm glad we were able to push it to that mark. I don't know why. I just like the idea that we crossed that line. So thanks. And if you want to come back, I do like the idea of a panel with you, me, and Sean. I think that'd be an interesting little thing to do. All right. So thanks everyone who joined. Thanks for the comments. It's definitely our most engaging so far. So it looks like doing the podcast thing is building up some steam. So I appreciate everyone who came, all the comments. Jake, my guest. Until next time, I'm not sure when it'll be, but I'll send you guys notices. Peace out, Copy Squad.
See ya.